Bagley.
Here.
Harding. Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo.
Here.
Rowe.
Here.
Mr. President.
Here. Please rise, and we're going to do things a little bit differently today, in that we're going to start off with remarks and then do the pledge after that. Councilman Rowe.
Thank you. In the United States, Flag Day is celebrated on June 14th. It commemorates the adoption of the flag of the United States on June 14th, 1777, by resolution of the Second Continental Congress. The flag resolution stated, resolved that the flag of the 13 United States be 13 stripes, alternating red and white, that the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field, representing a new constellation. Working as a grade school teacher in Wabeka, Wisconsin in 1885, Bernard Segrand held the first recognized formal observance of Flag Day at the Stony Hill School. From the late 1800s on, Segrand spoke around the country promoting patriotism, respect for the flag, and the need for annual observance of a Flag Day on June 14th. In the late 1950s, when it seemed certain that Alaska would be admitted to the Union, designers began retooling the American flag to add the 49th star to the existing 48. Meanwhile, a 17-year-old Ohio student named Bob Heft borrowed his mother's sewing machine, disassembled his family's 48-star flag, and stitched on 50 stars in a proportional pattern. He handed in his creation to his history teacher for a class project, explaining that he expected Hawaii would soon achieve statehood as well. That's the flag that we salute today. Please join me in our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, as we do each week before our meetings. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was cool.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of legislative chambers.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Omaha City Council. We welcome you to our meeting today and look forward to hearing your testimony on our many items. Please turn your cell phones to off or at least to vibrate. We are going to start with a proclamation for Waste and Recycling Workers Week. I've asked Councilman Bagley to read this for us as chairman of the Public Works Committee. And I know we have representatives here from First Star and FCC and also our Public Works Department. So we look forward to recognizing their hard work today. Councilman Bagley.
Thanks, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. Whereas trash and recycling collection are two of the most vital services that the city of Omaha provides as a municipal government, and waste and recycling workers contribute to a tidy and clean community and make significant contributions to the safety, health, and welfare of citizens. And whereas, according to the Centers for Disease Controls and Prevention, the eradication of many diseases in the Western world is due in large part to higher public sanitation standards resulting from effective garbage disposal. And whereas the proper collection and disposal of waste and recyclables are vital to preventing disease, litter, and dump heaps. And our community recognizes the often thankless job of trash and recycling professionals. And whereas Omaha values and celebrates the trash collectors, dumpster haulers, sewage workers, street cleaners, janitors, and custodial staff, and all other employed in the sanitation industry to serve residents and local businesses. And during the week of June 17, 2022, we joined together to thank the men and women who work daily to keep our neighborhoods and streets safe and clean. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Omaha officially designates June 14th, 2022 Waste and Recycling Workers Week in Omaha, Nebraska. in witness whereof we have set our hands and caused the official seal of the city of Omaha to be affixed on this 14th day of June, 2022. And one little side note, I'd like to say that the dignity of these men and women that do this work, a thankless job, it's 97 degrees today. If you see them out there rolling around, throw them a bottle of water, because I can tell you that little gesture makes a huge difference in the work they do. So is someone here from FCC?
Yeah, please come on up.
Coming to you.
Feel free to comment, yeah, please.
Aaron Anderson, General Manager with FCC, representing. Just like to say that we're proud to be a part of the community, helping servicing the city of Omaha. Take a lot of pride, and we appreciate the thanks from everyone. So thank you.
Go ahead.
Jim Key, Public Works Department. In addition to FCC and the hard work they do, we've also got First Star Fiber here. They are the city's contracted recycling processor. And so all of those things that the residents are putting into their green bins to go be another product and have another life, they're the folks that are sorting through that material and getting it to end markets so that it does have that second life. And so I'd like to introduce one of them, or have one of them come up and also get some accolades.
Except for, I think you still said green bins. I think it's carts now, right?
It is carts. I've been with the city a while.
Of course I have it, huh? Go ahead.
Mike Bachman, First Star Fiber. I'd like to thank the FCC staff for bringing us the material in timely, good fashion. The City of Omaha citizens for doing a much better job of recycling and getting the proper things in their bins, and everybody else for their efforts to keeping things out of the landfill. I'd also like to recognize our staff at First Star Fiber who do a thankless job of getting things sorted and out the door. So, yeah.
Thank you. Also a difficult job on a hot day like today. Councilman Harding, you're recognized.
Begley also said this, but I think it bears repeating. It's very fitting that we're making this proclamation today, especially because of the high temperatures over the last couple days and extreme conditions that these people work under. So seriously, if you see someone out there, put a bottle of water, bottle of Gatorade, something like that out there, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Begley.
Thanks, Mr. President. I did take a tour of First Star last summer after I got on the council, and the work those folks do standing and sorting out, so when people recycle, it's an amazing operation that you guys have there. And please give my best to the workers there on it. It's a tough job they do every day, and the citizens of Omaha appreciate that because it helps our planet and keep everything clean in the city. So please thank them for me. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Madam Clerk.
Items 6 and 7 can be considered together for Serenity Estates, Replat 1, located southwest of Skyline Drive and Stanford Circle. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 6, a resolution to approve the final plat. Item 7, a resolution to approve the amendment to the subdivision agreement.
Public hearing and vote on items 6 and 7 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, my name is Andrew Koster with Thompson, Driscoll, and Dorner, the civil engineer on the project. I'm just here to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, and your address too?
10836 Old Mill Road, Omaha 68154.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Bagley. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 6 and 7 are approved, 7-0. Items 8 through 11 can be considered together for Hamilton Village, located northwest of 41st Avenue and Hamilton Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 8, an ordinance to rezone this property from GC District to R8 District. Item 9, an ordinance to approve a PUR overlay district. Item 10, a resolution to approve the final plat. Item 11, a resolution to approve the subdivision agreement.
Public hearing and vote on items 8, 9, 10, and 11 are today. Proponents, please.
Andrew Reck, 14503 Grover Street, Omaha 68144, with the representative of the owner with the Feuchald Civil Engineering Firm, here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Stewart, opponent?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'm opposed to this type of development. It's getting pretty close into my neighborhood too. But I have some questions that I need to ask because I guess this is a hearing and maybe I don't understand what a hearing is. But this area has been vacant and what I consider blighted for quite a while. But some of this area still has automobiles setting on it. There's a couple of houses back behind one of the old car dealerships that used to be a filling station that appear to be still occupied because they're city-owned trash cans in the yard. They don't look like they're closed up. But when I go to your documents, I find out that there's, there is a neighborhood association. If there isn't one already, they will create one. There's no documentation that says that they have. There's no documentation that says who's been talked to other than maybe some business owners. So, is there an association or isn't there, and how many residents of those three houses that will be demolished, apparently, according to these documents? I drove by there today. I wonder if those people know that. Have they been talked to? Did they get a notice? Again, you're getting pretty close to my area. I live just a little ways west of 50th and up the street a block south of Hamilton. A lot of apartment units in there that are what I consider dilapidated and probably should be blighted. And obviously, you'll be going after those pretty soon. But this Saddle Creek strip, yes, there could benefit from some businesses. But it's how we acquire them that I wonder about. Did some of those businesses that vacated those lots a long time ago not pay their property tax, or did they get drove out by high fees for code violations or something? Used to be a big auto dealer there. There might still be some auto dealer. There's a bunch of cars on the other side of the street where the street goes that way from Hamilton. Used to be a labor organization. Not very far up the street is a church that was a bowling alley. But that street that goes that way west and north is I guess your aim. But also in those documents I find 3 or 4 different names associated with it. JD Property Management was one of them. I understand this is probably going to be a senior living facility. I might not have to move real far possibly, but maybe it won't be affordable. How did these lots become so vacant, and why did they sit vacant for so long? How did the company acquire it? Was it through real estate purchase, or was it through the land bank maybe? Lots of questions that haven't been answered. One second, please. The dates on the documents go back as early as January 21st of 22. So it's not just that it was not decided. It has been decided. The question is, why do we spend money having a public hearing when it's a done deal anyway? Why not save the taxpayers money and get more work done for the same dollar? Yeah, you have to vote to make it formal, I guess, but all the other paperwork's been done. Everybody's approved it. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Bagley.
Did you want to go? Go ahead. Okay. Thanks, Mr. President. I was just going to comment. Sorry, what number are we on, just so I'm clear?
8 through 11.
Okay, thanks. I want to make sure. So the Papillon RD, in partnership with the city and philanthropic organizations and others, this is a great project for that, although it's not my district, but I know the investment, over $2 million of Papillon RDs made with partnerships on that Beltline Trail. So this will be a good complement to that area just north of Cathedral where I grew up. A lot of work's been put into that, so I want to commend the NRD for that, but this, again, project, I'll be glad to support this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, is your light on?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Rick, if you could step up to the mic.
Yep.
Have a few questions for you, basically to redress some of the questions that were asked previously. Do you have any idea the number of homes that were demolished in that area?
I don't know how many homes were originally on all of the lots that made up that area, but there are 3 homes there currently standing today, and they've been vacant as long as I've been a part of the project, so there hasn't been anyone living in them since my knowledge.
And do you know the neighborhood association that's nearby or within that area?
I do not. One of the owner representatives had a discussion with them a while back, 6 months ago probably, so I can't remember the details of that. But they did have a brief discussion, and I'm not sure if the subdivision agreement is also maybe what he was referring to with the development of the Hamilton Village Homeowners or Owners Association. But
So did you do any outreach to the area in terms of the current residents there to let them know about the development at all?
I did not personally, but I believe the owners did reach out.
Okay. When it's convenient for you, can you forward that information to me just so that I have information on that to answer any pushback should I get some from the residents there?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what happened to the businesses that were there before you recognized the area as an opportunity to develop?
I do not. As I said, I joined as the civil engineer sometime at the end of last year. And, don't have, the owner would have knowledge, but I just don't know what were those businesses and what happened to them.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Fanslow, would you be able to answer the questions regarding how the properties were acquired, the 3 lots that we talked about, and then perhaps what happened to the businesses that were there prior to this development?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, Dave Fanslow, City Planning. I don't know the history. I don't know how long the sites have been vacant. And I don't know what happened to the businesses. I think it's been in the state that it's been in for a while.
So a while, maybe 10 years or so, or?
I'd have to go back and look at old aerial photographs to see what the past condition of the site was.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to move that. Obviously, the area is very much needed in terms of filling up the area up in terms of economic growth and everything for North Omaha, more importantly, the city of Omaha. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend and make a motion to approve this.
Second. Roll call.
Bagley.
Aye.
Harding.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 12, to consider a Class C liquor license for Wyndham Omaha Hotel located at 655 North 108th Avenue.
Public hearing on vote on number 12 is today. We have the applicant by Zoom, Alexis Eli. We'll get you off mute here in a second. Hold on one second. We still have you on mute. We'll try and switch it here. Okay, try that.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexis Ely. Address is 655 North 108th Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska 68154.
Thank you. I'm just here to answer questions.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other proponents on number 12 today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Bagley.
Aye.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved, 7-0. Item 13, to consider a Class B liquor license for Family Dollar Store 32888, located at 4310 Ames Avenue. A's communication in opposition.
Public hearing and vote on number 13 is today. We also have this applicant by Zoom, Jonathan Crumley. We'll get you off mute here in a second. Okay, try that.
Hello.
Hi. Name and address?
Yes, Jonathan Crumley, 1600 Parkwood Circle, Suite 200. That's Atlanta, Georgia, 30039. Here to answer any questions on the application.
Great, thanks. Any other proponents today on number 13? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Crumley, can you give me some information regarding your outreach to the neighborhood at this location?
We followed the procedures and posted the notice, and I believe that in this application process, there's amendments required, but we followed all of the processes that we have done for this and other applications.
So in terms of going beyond that scope and letting folks know that there's going to be a new business, you did nothing?
No, it's an no, I do not believe we did any specific outreach related to this application, no.
What hours can you tell me the hours of operation of your store?
Yes, I believe this store is from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week.
And what type of liquor will you be selling?
It would be beer only for off-premises consumption.
And your manager of this Family Dollar, what type of education have they received to manage the selling of liquor?
The manager would have received Family Dollar standard training, which includes being educated on local requirements for sale. We have a robust enforcement program that includes a zero tolerance policy for failure to comply. We card every purchase. We do not sell to any visibly intoxicated patrons. And we train each both register operator and management staff on all the requirements. For the 2-year period from 2019 to 2021, the company has has a fairly good record nationwide, have less than 0.04% violations compared to the number of stores that have been permitted to sell off-premises beer and wine.
Okay, and what type of security will you provide at this location?
I do not know what type of security is provided. I do know they have security cameras in the store, on front doors, cash registers, receiving and stockroom areas.
My final question is, if the neighborhood should have some concerns, questions, what have you, who would they reach out to make those concerns known?
They're happy to speak with the store manager there in person, or contact the district manager. If anybody on your staff or at the city has specific questions, we've given you contact information for both our staff as well as the national staff for Family Dollar based in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Thank you. I move that we go ahead and approve this license.
I believe this has to be subject to Rule 7, right? The waiver of Rule 7?
Subject to waiver Rule 7.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Bagley.
Aye.
Harding. Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
Thank you.
Item
Thank you.
4 Item 14, to consider a Class A liquor license for Hawaii Nails located at 10631 Fort Street.
Public hearing and vote on number 14 is today. Proponents, please. Number 14? Yeah, come on down. And then just your name and address for the record there.
One Foster, the owner at Hawaii Nails.
And your address.
Which the location is at 10631 4th Street.
Thank you. And
My name's Craig Foster. This is my wife. I'm here to help translate if there was any questions she didn't understand.
okay, same address.
She's the individual owner, but I'm still here to help.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents that want to speak today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second, roll call.
Bagley. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0.
Thanks.
Item 15, to consider a liquor license addition application for a Mega Saver located at 8409 West Center Road to add a storage area.
Public hearing and vote on number 15 is today. We have the applicant by Zoom, Lola Kalikova.
Good afternoon. My name is Lola Halikova. The address is 202 South 73rd Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68114. Store address is 8409 West Center Road, Omaha, Nebraska as well. We're here to requesting the liquor license for the addition that was built out for the existing building. The existing building already has the liquor license. This is just the addition where we will keep our storage and back stock.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Motion approved.
Motion and a second, roll call.
Bagley. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0.
Thank you.
Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 16 through 19 were held on June 7th. Roll call.
Bagley. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items number 20 through 44 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. And I will note that we have 3 library board appointments in this section of the agenda, number 38, 39, and 40. And we do have those candidates by Zoom today, should council members have any questions. Anyone on these items? Seeing none, public hearings are closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Bagley. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0. Item 45, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment for street improvement project 2019-05 for Poppleton Avenue from South 78th Street to South 78th Avenue.
Public hearing on number 45 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 46, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment for Street Improvement District 2019-01 for Emmett Street from North 83rd Street to its terminus west of North 85th Street.
Public hearing on number 46 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents?
Hello, my name is Brent Melsker. I live at 3402 North 83rd Street. I appeared before you as a
Board of Equalization meeting. So I'd just like to officially go on the record that I'm still opposed to this assessment on corner lot properties. I've heard that there might be something in the works, but I don't know if anything's officially going to be announced or there's going to be an amendment to this assessment today.
Okay. I'll call you back up in a second.
Okay.
Any other opponents that want to speak today on number 46? Okay, I don't see any. I'll close public hearing, but Brent, I'll have you come back up. So this particular SID is in my district in the Keystone area, and we have the next 4 or 5 items are all SIDs of similar nature. And I know we have some Public Works Committee members here that might want to discuss a little bit about their meeting today and their work on the issues that came before the Board of Equalization at the time, mostly in terms of number 48, the Ridgewood Avenue project, but then also the corner lot situation that was described that day and that you mentioned. And so I just wanted to make sure we had this context right as it applies to to this item, which is number 46, as they consider how to handle these issues going forward and a corner lot issue that we've discussed. There's several different versions of the corner lot issue, though, and I want to make sure we had an understanding of yours. So in this case, your block decided to proceed with an SID, and it was not unanimous, but it was a majority that decided to move forward. I believe you're the only corner lot on that street, is that right?
No, there are 2 others.
2 to the west?
One south and then one to the west.
Okay. In your case, though, it was not an issue of double assessment. The street improvement was only on one side of your property, correct?
Correct.
And I believe all property owners were assessed the same amount by the formula they chose to pursue, right?
By lot. One property owner he owns 2 lots, so he was assessed twice.
Okay. But all equal amounts on
Correct.
the formula you chose to use. So in this case, it's not the same as a lot that was double assessed, like we'll talk about here in a minute, I think. But the issue is still you feel like it's not the improvement you wanted, and you weren't in favor of the SID in the first place.
Correct. It's a terminus street or a terminus road, so it ends. There is like a back alley out of there, but according to the documentation here, it is a terminus road, so it's an dead-end road.
Okay. And then you otherwise border 83rd Street, which was already paved.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and I face 83rd Street and don't use Emmett Street at all.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to say about your particular case?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other lights on this one, but I'm sure there'll be more discussion on the following items. So we'll move to item number 47.
Item 47, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment for Street Improvement District 2019-06 for Walnut Street from South 76th Street to South 78th Street.
Public hearing on number 47 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 48, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment for Street Improvement District 6881 for Ridgewood Avenue from Poppleton Avenue to Hickory Street. A's amendment of the whole requested by the Law Department.
Public hearing on number 48 is today. Proponents, please.
Sure, it's hot out there. It's nice to be in this air conditioning. It's nice to have some evidence that we were heard the last time we were here talking to you guys. My name is Ryan Palmer, 1326 Ridgewood Avenue. I'm a proponent for these amendments, and if the assessment gets adequate adjustment, I'd be a proponent for assessing the property owners to pay for their fair share of the street. I apologize, I didn't send out the email that I sent earlier this morning to you like last week when I sent the rest of the emails, but my grandfather passed away on Tuesday and it's been a heck of a week. And if I lose my composure, I'm sorry. I really haven't done anything except deal with that. He was one of my best friends, and it's really been weighing on me and my time. And here it is Tuesday. We've got to deal with this, and you're all expecting me to show up and be here to represent the SID. I was the guy who went around in the beginning and said, we got to do something about this. I talked all the 21 property owners into committing to the project, and their main stipulation was, yeah, but the city and the public's got to pay for the drainage. I said, well, we're working on that. We've got a lot of things working in our favor. We have some council members who are supportive of us and empathetic, and we just need our opportunity to explain our case and show the difference in cost for us and the others, and I think they'll make it work out. I can talk pretty fast when I have to, but everybody knew we needed to fix that street, and the city apparently needed our help to get it done because it hadn't been done for decades, and there were open ditches on both sides. It was like a sandcastle every time it rained. There was tons of maintenance just to maintain the sandcastle that was rebuilt after every heavy downpour. I came here personally when we formed the SID, and I said, quote, this drainage system deserves serious consideration in this process. When I came down and we were trying to decide what the cost share was, this was exactly when the new policy was being introduced. And we had all the information that we could share. I made a very convincing and thorough, lengthy case that we deserved additional cost share. Mr. Jerem was under the impression at that time that we would have another opportunity to come down and present our case for additional cost share. And everyone that was on the council at that time agreed that that was an important part of the integrity of the policy, is that we could present our case for exceptional circumstances. We wanted 75-25 split at the time, and that is what would have brought it down to comparable per linear foot costs to the property owners for the rest of, compared to the rest of the SIDs that were under construction. Plus, we had so much public value in doing ours. We made a really good case, and in order to move forward, we needed better than 50%. Mr. Jerem said, quote, I would ask that we issue the Ridgewood Avenue group an extra 10% cost share at this juncture. We were under the impression that we would have an opportunity to come back to the Board of Equalization, look at all the numbers now that they're known, compare our pipe costs to everyone else's, take a solid look at, what is going to be fair in this, and then we could be glad we did business with the city. As you may remember, I realize you have a lot of other items on the agenda every week. A couple months ago, we were down here, and the consensus was that we weren't treated properly and that we weren't treated fairly. There needed to be transparency. There needed to possibly be adjustments in the policy. There were a number of issues that we wanted more information on so that we could make an accurate argument in front of you all or a court. Yet that information has trickled out, if at all. And I don't think it's right to just, focus on one change order that Public Works described. There were lots of things I would have loved to just say, excuse me, I have different information on that, but out of respect for the meeting and the process, and because I had already spoke so much, I just sat back and let it happen. I figured I could watch the video later. Apparently that meeting is not available for video record, and you must submit a public records request to hear it on audio. So once I found that out, I did that, and I received that request yesterday. I had access, apparently, to the audio. And then when I went and clicked the audio, it didn't work. And so apparently you can't listen to it from a mobile device. It's just the layers of transparency, the layers of where transparency wasn't there are just, they keep getting thicker. And if we're going to enter into a public-private partnership to solve these street problems, we expect to be treated fairly. We expect there to be transparency, and we expect it to work out to be a pretty good deal. That said, there's an amendment on this item to remove the $150,000 in change order from our costs. But I have to say, what about the other $95,000? Our construction costs went up $244,000 from bid acceptance. I'd really like to make sure that is addressed. And then I would just like to point out in the contract, This is the project manual. This is the project manual for Omaha Public Works 53195 and OPW 53353. In the contract, if we can get it to focus, I've underlined it here. It says the bidder is familiar with and has satisfied itself as to all laws and regulations that may affect cost, progress, performance of the work. Bidder has carefully studied all reports of explorations and tests of subsurface conditions at or adjacent to the site and all drawings of physical conditions relating to existing surface or subsurface structures. So they should have known that there was an elevation issue prior to the design getting its final completion. It was supposed to take 18 months to 4 years to finish our project, and it took over 6 years. And the level of communication we received in the beginning was adequate. It was thorough, and we were getting answers so that we continued to move forward. And then when problems started to happen on the project, we pretty much got a door hanger once in a while, but there was no back and forth like we didn't get the answers that we were asking. We asked questions in October of 2020. We asked them again. We asked some of the similar questions January 21st, and it's just like we're being ignored. And I realize you have lots of other stuff going on, but this street is right in front of our house, and it's all we have to think about. I've been paying attention the whole time, and they've been looking to me for answers, and I've been assuring them, hey, the council is the ones that are going to decide. And they are good people. We have a good council working for us. They do good work. I watch them every week. You got to have faith. You got to keep moving forward. Let's do this, you know? So I definitely would like to find out about this other $95,000. We need to somehow compensate the property owners for the unnecessary hardship that was involved with that change order and the others. The city has not acknowledged the delay in road opening caused by this change order and the generally deficient work. Residents are owed considerations for these significant delays, which again should have been avoidable. The contract itself has specifically addressed these issues ahead of time, so that, and it even says so that it's not an issue after the project if we have delays or insufficient work, and it's about delays for substantial completion, and it's delays for the project completion. $1,500 per day for substantial completion and $800 a day for completing the project. I know that these are, often kind of just laughed at or put to the side, but in this case, we have a legitimate claim for this. And with over 3 months of delays and repeated requests for that information, we literally have $37,500 coming to us by my calculation, and just in the difference in the days that were on my records. And then we have $40,000 coming to us in liquidated damages based on just the dates to finish completion. And they could have been completed in a matter of days had the contractor chosen to make it a higher priority, but for some reason they didn't. And we had the street closed in both directions for 50 days, unnecessarily. The answers that Public Works provided to us at the Board of Equalization hearing, they were not adequate, they were not sufficient, they were not accurate as to why we didn't receive liquidated damages in this project. It says so right in the contract. We have construction engineering costs to Benesh of $125,000. With all these problems and delays, they obviously failed to perform to industry standard. The construction engineering costs I know are largely supposed to be added assurance that it will be designed properly, and apparently it wasn't because we had this major elevation issue. The construction engineers are supposed to be on site to make sure that it gets done right, yet we still had all of these problems and all of these delays. So given it gives rise to question our liability for engineering and inspection costs, which also increased with these change orders. And if they aren't doing their job of watching the Public Works Department do their job, then what the heck are we paying for? Fourth item is the cost of the drainage system should not be put on the adjacent property owners. We've been making that case at every meeting, and it's the main reason our SID was so much more costly than all others. It's the main reason it didn't get done forever. It's the main reason that you can justify public funds to support the project and make it comparable to what other SIDs have paid per linear feet. If you're not familiar with topography, each of these red lines shows an elevation decrease of 10 feet. Our SID is inside this outline right here. That's the property that's actually adjacent to these two blocks of Ridgewood Avenue. This is Woolworth. This is 84th Street. This is Pacific Street. Everywhere inside of this blue area, through simple gravity and math, is coming through the drainage system that was put into our street. When a drainage system like this is needed, it's usually spread out over all of the lots in the entire subdivision, which usually might cover like 80 acres. In this case, the area covers 78.25 acres. So normally, we would be assessed there's 125 lots that benefit from this drainage system, 125, and our SID is 21. So in a normal, spreading out the costs of a huge concrete drainage system that the public needs just to drive on the street, we would receive 1/125th of the cost of that drainage system. Yet we're being expected to cover 1/121st. So that's a 600% increase in what is normally assessed to the adjacent property owners with a drainage system that's this large. And so I just wanted to show you that because the magnitude of how we are being exploited in this is unacceptable. It's mind-boggling when you look at the numbers. And you guys need to know this so that you can make a decision that you can stand up behind and be proud of and make it lasting so that other SIDs can say, well, that's what you did there. And if they can't make the same arguments, you don't have to pay them. You don't have to give them the extra money. But this cost of this drainage system, that's the rub. That's the thing that's costing more than all the other SIDs. That's the thing where these change orders were needed. That's the things that really shouldn't be included in SIDs, at least not when they're this big. And that was the impression that we got all along, is that we would have a chance to, once all the numbers were known, you would be able to say if it was fair or not. Our pipe costs, according to the final estimate, which it's probably gone up quite a bit since now, but each of these items comes from this document that is the official Schedule A from the bid of $1.1 million, $1.15 million is what the total project was supposed to cost. And the pipe cost in that alone is $400,000. I challenge you to show us any SID that's paid anywhere close to that amount of money for the drainage system, especially one that has as much public benefit as ours does, and there really was no choice. You guys were going to be getting calls and probably a lawsuit from somebody getting injured on that road if we hadn't fixed it. So this was supposed to be a win-win situation. And the neighbors I've talked to, not all of them could get off work again to come down here, but it's something needs to be done right, because none of us really have a good taste in our mouth about this, even after your amendment to try to, compensate for the $150,000 change order.
Okay. So to summarize your discussion, you're a proponent because you're supportive of the amendment, but you wish further action based on the points you just made.
Correct, and it appears that this is the only venue where that is discussion can take place, because we've made multiple requests for a good faith discussion with Public Works over the last year and a half, and they've been ignored.
Okay.
So I have three more points that I'd like to make sure to get on the record, and then I'd be happy to come back up. I've got an entire box of information. I don't think anyone's been paying attention to this SID as closely as I have, so I would encourage you, if there's gray area, you don't understand, be glad to come back up. I'll keep it as concise as I can, but this is the only time we have This is the only opportunity for us to make our case, and we've been waiting for it for 6 years. So I hope you'll have the patience and
Yeah.
allow us that so that we can come to a successful resolution.
3 more points, then we'll have some discussion.
Most importantly, this system was underbuilt for the water that it takes on. According to our friend's assessment, who has engineering credibility, it takes a 96-inch pipe to require the 10-year. A 96-inch pipe is required to handle a 10-year storm, and that's city standard. Build the storm system to handle a 10-year storm. It requires a 96-inch pipe. Well, the SID flows downhill into a 48-inch pipe. So the water that falls onto this SID, it does not always fit into the existing pipe. And I would just like someone to get that confirmed from Public Works on record at this meeting. And you can take that into consideration as to how much you're going to be able to compensate to make this fair. The next point is the entire storm drainage system will need to be rebuilt someday to address this mismatch of size and water volume. I would also like confirmation from legal, the council, and Public Works that because we have formed an SID and improved the street to city standards, we will not be assessed for any future construction related to this street and especially to the concrete drainage pipe. We're already paying dearly for it once. We are not interested in paying for it twice. And then last, you've got to find a way to make this fair, uniform, and proportionate by state statute. I've got lots of material to help you do that. I've presented I sent you all a spreadsheet that outlines our costs versus SIDs built around the same period. If there's missing information in there or it's inaccurate, I would be glad to address that. This is it. This is your chance. This is where you make or break our SID, you make or break the policy, and you make or break the public opinion about getting involved with SIDs. So I'm hopeful. I think that our council is empowered and willing to make this right now that all of this information has come to light, and we still have lots of questions for Public Works.
Okay, thank you. And sorry for your loss.
Thank you, sir.
Other proponents today on number 48.
Hi, Jordan Hoff. I'm at 8010 Woolworth Avenue. We're a corner lot that's on Ridgewood as well. 68124. Yeah, I'm just not a whole lot that I can add that Ryan hasn't already said. We're definitely, we're proponents of the amendment, and really just want it to be corrected and fair for everybody. I also have an additional issue. I can wait until the Woolworth, but being a quarter lot, I believe you were speaking to this before about us having to pay double effectively. So, but yeah, we can keep it on topic for now. I think that's.
We'll come back to that for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents.
Good afternoon, Mike Luther, 1315 Ridgewood Avenue, here on behalf of my wife Laura Luther, and I'm a proponent for further action. I think Ryan did a very good job of expressing the issues. I know he's worked awfully hard on this project and suffered a recent family loss. He's emotional, but and I think we're very pleased with the effort on behalf of the city. This has been a long, long road for us, figuratively and literally, and I think we got it mostly right, and it will never be perfect. I think just would be very grateful if there was a disciplined process to identify and recognize these issues. And we realize that it's not the city alone. There were third-party contractors that were involved here, and we feel that they have a debt to to the city and to ourselves, and we want to see a constructive process forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents? Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Ryan, first, sorry for your loss. You're wearing it on your sleeve, and we can feel your heart's heavy today, brother. And your grandpa, no doubt, is looking down pretty proud of the passion you bring. Even before he passed, you and I met, and I felt your passion on this, and this preceded me. I just wanted a couple comments to make. The emails you sent this morning, apologize we didn't get back to you. I know you're busy, but I know my colleagues and I, when we get emails from constituents on council day, it's tough. Today was as full of a day as I've had down here, so we weren't ignoring you, but we got your prior emails. And as always, you bring a lot of material to the table. As evident, people can't see out there, you got a big box next to you where you're sitting. I just wanted to tell you that the Public Works Committee and staff, certainly you and I have talked. I know my friend and colleague, Councilman Palermo, who brings a lot of expertise and has helped me through this process of Ridgewood and what's going on out there, that as I learned back in, if it was 2018, when my predecessor there was nothing that the city gave financially to these projects. And then the one you guys got was 60%, and then we got a policy in place after that, which is good, so we can build off that. The amendment we got here today before us, and we have been working, just because you don't hear from us every day, I assure you, our staff, and I've been talking to my colleagues a lot about this, when the price went from, the cost share was 0% prior to the policy, you guys got 60%, which was good. I'm not taking away from the headaches that you have, that you shared with us in the Board of EEC, in the emails you've sent, in the vote we'll have before us to move it up to 68%. Oftentimes in negotiations, it's about give and take. One side normally gets not everything they want. Whatever happens here, I can say that the effort's been made to try to understand it. And I'll let my friend Councilman Palermo, if he wanted to weigh in, but I just want to recognize that the things you brought to us, I've learned a lot of it, and talking to staff and trying to get through it, we're still working through it. It's just a public hearing today, as you know. So we got 2 weeks that we're going to continue to try to work and make this policy better in the future to change it. But I appreciate you coming down today in tough times in your life, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palermo. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Mr. Bagley for the pressure of saying something. Mr. Palmer, I'm going to miss you. A couple weeks from now, we're not going to see you. And you've been here on this project ever since I've been on this council, so I'm sure you'll still send emails, and I appreciate that. And that's what we've had with this project, right? A lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. We've met, you've met with others, and we find ourselves here figuring out how we got here. And ultimately, to back up for those that don't know, although we have a new street policy, we always had a street policy before that. And it was that the city of Omaha paid zero for every single project that happened, whether it was an SID, an RMD, or whatever it may be. And I'd have to say I'm probably one of the few people in this building that disagreed with that, because I truly believe that in this city, roads are the city's responsibility, no matter what they are. From the beginning of time, whether you paid to put that road in when you built your home, or whether you're paying for it now, the roads are our responsibility. But I give credit to Public Works and those who moved forward when we knew a policy had to be adopted. Because when RMDs and SIDs came before us, I voted against every single one of them because we didn't have a policy. And so within that department, they did work really hard to adopt a policy, which is new. And when things are new, things need changed and tweaked, and we have situations that come before us that we have to adjust on the fly for. And that's where we find ourselves. So the policy now is 50-50, which again, it is what it is. It's the policy. I'm not saying I agree with it. And the other part of that too is people did listen within this building because we only had a few $100,000 in the unapproved road budget. Now we have millions of dollars in there because some throughout the city don't have the luxury to come before us and pay a portion of any road to get done. And even if they did have the means to do it, nobody wants to put money into a public road. So that's where we find ourselves. You have the SID in front of you. We voted to take it up to 60%, which I voted in favor of. There were circumstances that were certainly different. We've discussed within the committee that this is rare, and we're not going to go back on others that say, well, hey, what about us? And then as we continue to move forward, we continue to listen, and we've upped that to 68%. So from the beginning to 0 to now to 68%, when I hear you say fair for all, although we agree a lot, what is fair for all? Is 68% not fair for all? Because again, there are people within the city that you could give them 99% and they still can't fix their roads. So we find ourselves with this part of the public value of this street. Sure, it is a public value. Sure, people do use your street. I don't drive up and down your street, but I know you folks do every single day because you have to go home. So, but I'm being asked to pay for it, but I don't use your street. So sure, there's a public value there. The liquidated damages part you mentioned, I'm pretty positive, and we can verify with Public Works that it doesn't apply to RMDs or SIDs. On the fact that you said there was an $800 fee per day times how many days. Actually, let's figure that out right now. Director Stubbe?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works.
Would this be for you or Heather Tippy Pierce on this question?
Well, when we talk about liquidated damages, typically it's not applicable on all projects. I don't recall if this particular one had LDs on it, but if Heather knows that, obviously we can provide that information before you vote on the 28th also.
Okay, and it is public comment, but here comes Heather, so we'll ask her. I want to be clear on some of these that we've heard today.
Heather Tippy Pierce, Public Works. From what I understand, based on the notes from the previous construction engineer, liquidated damages were not assessed to this project because the contractor was allowed to demobilize within the days that were provided through contract and change orders. So since their work was substantial enough to be demobilized, they did not apply liquidated damages. Sorry, I have a bit of a head cold, so I'm doing my best.
No, you're doing great. Help me out with this. The terminology on a percentage of a project that is completed, and from that point on, there can be no damages. What do we call that?
So, in this case, the majority of the liquidated damages rested on substantial completion. And that's when we allow the contractor to demobilize, leave the site, pending review from the department. And so what I understand from the previous construction engineer's notes is that the contractor did complete an acceptable level of work within the days allowed to substantial completion, and therefore liquidated damages were not assessed.
Okay, thank you. So back to the SID in front of us. We also asked, how did we get to this situation? I have to imagine the houses along this corridor are 50, 60 years old, which means that unapproved road has been unapproved for that long. And we know that people throughout the city, and I've said it numerous times before, some people like to live on unapproved roads. It slows people down, it keeps people off of them. In some instances, when there's a school or that sort of thing, there's no way to stay off it. So I find myself asking, how did we get to this point? Was it when we decided to stop taking care of unapproved roads? Because what we used to do when there was leftover asphalt is we would come along these unapproved areas, and those workers within the district certainly knew where to take this leftover material that we paid for as a city, and instead of wasting it by taking it back to their yard at the end of the day, they would put it in the road. It wasn't a permanent fix, and patch, quilt, whatever you want to call it. I know it made people happy, because a lot of times we had people stand right here at this podium and tell us, well, you used to come by every once in a while, but now we find ourselves in this spot. But there, again, are people in the city that don't have that option, and we don't provide that service anymore. So if you're not going to have an RMD or an SID, your other option is to pulverize it a couple times a year, which we do our best to do that. So did we cause the city of Omaha? Did we cause this road to deteriorate into the situation we found it in before it was turned into an SID? I don't know, because that's what's going to weigh on me. It's really tough to sit here knowing we're 18% higher as a community to pay for this road when we talk about public value, although anybody that doesn't live within that District 66 corridor or have kids at that school or get off of Pacific because of a red light, how is it deemed public value for them? They're not going to use this road. And that's where I'm at. So I'm stuck from the fact that it used to be 0, now it's 50, we voted on 60, now we're at 68, which I really was kind of working with some of my colleagues behind the scenes to say, hey, these people are right along here. There was some unforeseen circumstances. I'm not going to get into the drainage part. I'm not going to get into the pipe costs. But it seemed like there was a little bit extra that should have been awarded, knowing when we say awarded that somebody is paying for this, and it's all of us in this room if you live within the city of Omaha. See, Danny, you had to call me out. Now I just won't stop. So that's where I find myself. I know this is public hearing today. We'll certainly be voting on this in a couple weeks. We still have a lot of questions too, Mr. Palmer, that we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks. And to be honest, as I sit here today, I don't know where I'm at, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I would just add, I think the amendment of the whole does indicate some movement on this issue, given its unique history and its unique challenges. I want to come back to the corner lot issue here in a minute, but there was, I think, the two main questions Mr. Palmer wanted to answer on the record that I think we can do sufficiently today. So, Mr. Stubbe or Ms. Tippy Pierce, should this sewer would not need to be upgraded again in the future? At least we do not anticipate that being a need. Would that be a correct statement?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. Yeah, anything that went in the ground as part of this project obviously should be capable of having a pretty significant life. So yes.
Okay, it's not foreseen if it need to be upgraded again. So
correct.
That's a correct statement. And then I believe I'm correct in saying no further assessments would come to this block because it is now considered a city street and up to code, and so therefore the city maintains these projects going forward.
Yes, so yeah, that's correct. So anytime a property owner or property owners pay for improving a street, that cost that is borne by them, the city takes over full responsibility from that point forward.
And I think that is one major incentive to pursuing a street improvement district is just that. I'd like to engage you on that corner lot issue if you want to come back up. I guess my first question to you is, would you rather engage on it here or on the next item? Is it this? I presume this was done first, and so the next one is where you got double assessed, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So why don't I'll call you back up on that one. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. I don't see any further lights on number 48, and the public hearing was closed.
Could you call me back up for a second?
Yes, Mr. Palmer, we'll give you one more comment here.
Thank you for your kind words and for making it seem like it's been worth my time, or it might be worth my time to do this. I'm a real estate agent. I deal with farms, and I feel like I'm working for a $120,000 commission. I got to split 21 different ways. So I also, just to note, I have the smallest frontage of anyone in this SID. And I've worked the hardest on it because it needs to be done. And I'm willing to pay more than what my fair share would be because it needs to be done. And I would just ask you guys to try to get to something where you feel like if you were the property owner, you'd feel like you were treated fairly. Because you start talking about percentages and, well, 68% is more than 50%. Well, it's okay. But if you want to talk about what's fair for all, Mr. Palermo, the best comparison for what's fair for all is what did it cost each property owner per linear foot of frontage? Is my street that much different than the street up the hill? And why would I need to have double that cost? And I'm not saying that the whole entire city uses the street like Dodge Street, but I'm also saying public uses our street a heck of a lot more than all the other SIDs. That's the point. I think that 68%.
Let's be brief too, if you would, because I want to get to the next item too.
Yeah, you're talking about the 68%, but that's disingenuous, claiming that the residents are getting a 68% cost share. The assessment that's suggested by the city right now is equivalent to a 59% cost share of our initial total project estimate. So we thought we were getting 40%, but we're actually paying 60% of the number that we were granted 40% on. And I would just encourage you to look at, the council voted 5-2 that day that we needed additional cost share. Not 60% is good enough for the whole project. It was like, we know they need help. This is how much we should give them today. There's not going to be another opportunity for us to go through it. And I would just point out, if our SID is not applicable for liquidated damages and SIDs, then why would it be on the contract? Why is it outlined in the contract? And I'd like you to know, we started asking for details about liquidated damages in October of 2019. We asked for the change orders and why they were granted. We sent multiple emails, and essentially we still don't know why were the extensions to substantial completion and project completion granted, for what reasons, and then what was this other $94,000 of construction changes? If we were compensated for the $150,000 change order, the fact pattern suggests that we have reason to question the other $94,000 in construction increases as well. But there's just this like.
Okay, we got that point, I think.
Anyway, I also, Mr. Palermo, I respect you so much. I love what you do on the council, and you represent the people so much. In this case, if you're not going to get into the pipe costs, we need some more time. Why wouldn't you get into the pipe costs? That's the thing. That's the main thing. You take those pipe costs out of our SID thing, you never saw me. I would never even be here. So take a hard look at that. How does our pipe costs really stack up to other SIDs? And let's find something that's fair.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Item 49, an ordinance levying a special tax and assessment for Street Improvement District 6883 for Woolworth Avenue from South 80th Street to Ridgewood Avenue.
Public hearing on number 49 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, once again, Jordan Hoff, 8010 Woolworth Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68124, as a proponent.
Thank you. I'll engage you here in a second. Okay. Any other proponents on number 49?
Ryan Palmer, 1326 Ridgewood Avenue. I think he got screwed. He's paying a lot more than he thought he was going to have to pay. I tried to tell him we'd work it out. We thought we were going to get a significant cost share on Woolworth too, and so I really feel bad for them. They just bought their house, and all of a sudden they're paying like twice as much as they thought.
Okay. Any other proponents on number 49? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. If you would come back to the microphone, I wanted to talk to you about your corner lot scenario. Just your name and address again for the record?
Yep, Jordan Hoff, 8010 Woolworth Avenue, 68124.
Okay. So in your case, when we discussed this corner lot issue at the Board of Equalization, it was in fact a situation where you had been assessed twice, but it was different projects. First, the previous agenda items number project came along and the block agreed to do it. I presume you were also a proponent of that at the time.
Yep.
And then this other one came along on the other side of your property with the same process and did it, which you also supported, I presume. But then came along with its own costs, and so a pretty major assessment to one property in that mix.
Yep, and if it matters, both were started prior to us moving in.
Okay, both prior to you being there?
Yep.
So you were not part of the election process then?
Right at the tail end of it. So the SIDs were formed, and so we had a little bit of involvement in some of the decision making. But
okay,
yeah.
And aware of them when you bought your property, I presume.
We were, however, I mean, they were presented to us as a roughly $14,000 increase. So, I mean, it's, you know, if I had known going into this, we would have been paying $50,000 plus instead of $14,000. I certainly probably would have negotiated a little more on the cost of our house. But
gotcha.
Yeah.
And both of these were linear footage, is that right?
No, they're both equal, even split.
Oh, just even by parcel. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So and I'm asking that question because this is I know a topic the Public Works Committee was trying to discuss today too. The corner lot issue, as you might call it, and then how that is informed by how a neighborhood chooses to be assessed, whether that's by lot or by linear footage, and what those impacts can be. So in your case, although there was benefits, but there were improvements on both sides of your property, they were two separate projects, and you got assessed twice.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Are there others on your street like that?
Yeah. Our neighbor to the south, Joe McCartney, she falls under the same situation. So,
okay.
Yeah, she's elderly, widowed, has people coming to her house regularly to take care of her. So.
Okay. Good. That helps with my understanding of that situation. I don't know if any Public Works Committee members want to talk about that yet today. It might still be a work in process from their perspective, but I wanted to make sure that we had that clear and how that's different than the situation in Keystone and how that's different than the situation we discussed in Ridgewood, but also part of this picture. And something we need to evaluate in terms of our policy going forward. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
And I think I'd just like to add, I don't know that I would be here if these were both assessed by linear footage. I mean, I think if both SIDs were linear footage, it would be our cost regardless. So I think really what it comes down to is, had this been one SID, because both were evenly divided, we just get to pay twice. So whatever. At the end of the day, that $50,000 is a hard pill to swallow when we were expecting 14 or, even at the worst, 28. So that's.
So in your case, you'd obviously, I'm sure, desire that you weren't assessed for both projects, but you'd still have the opinion that linear footage would be better in that scenario than per lot charges. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, linear footage would have been way worse.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Palermo. You're recognized.
Mr. President, I just wanted to add too, as well, within the Public Works Committee, the discussion we've had on the policy. Obviously, corner lots is something we need to look at moving forward, so that hopefully this is the last time that this happens. And also to those saying, well, gosh, why this area? Why is the city doing that? I want to remind people the city does not approach neighborhoods for SIDs or RMDs. It's a neighborhood champion that gathers up, gets the majority, and presents to Public Works to say, hey, we need some help. We want to put in some money and pay for our roads. Then it gets cloudy. But that's where we're at. It isn't we picked on you and said this is the road we're changing. You came, not you, your neighborhood came to the city and said, let's get this started. Your case in particular, because you're 80-10, right? Yep. And we got a great map today from Public Works of this whole area, which talks about the houses because it was it's two SIDs. So you have an SID going up and down Ridgewood, and you have another SID going or north and south, and you got another SID going east and west on Woolworth. And you happen to be on the corner lot, which means two separate SIDs, 2 times you're paying. And we know that's a problem. As we discussed today, a lot of hard work went into the street policy. We don't need to necessarily change the street policy we have, but it's once we gather all the information, we need to look at things better. Not just Public Works, but the council, the committee as well, and make sure that if you're on a quarter lot and there is going to be 2 different SIDs, that we look at this, because corner lots do benefit. Do they benefit to the tune of $40,000? Probably not. And I think most of us agree with that. So as we move forward with this one as well, but I know Heather's not feeling the best, but I feel like I should give you a chance to correct anything you've heard or mention anything that we are working on as you being the expert within Public Works. If you want to come on up, sorry.
Heather Tippy Pierce, Public Works. This is the map that you were talking about. So just so that everybody kind of see what's going on. SID 6881, that's Ridgewood, covers these 2 blocks here. 6883 is just this portion of Woolworth. So, Mr. Hoff, you said you were 80-10, right? Yep. So this is the property here. That is, because they were formed separately as separate districts, are looking at potentially 2 assessments. I think those are all factual statements. It's corner lots have been an issue since this process began, because the statutes, my understanding, very broadly define benefit and what is conveyed to a property by access to an improvement. These corner lots have been included in these districts. And so that's where we are today, is that based on the even split model that both of these districts have, Mr. Hoff and his neighbor to the south are receiving those 2 recommended assessments.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'll wrap up and be brief on this. Again, we are working through that in our committee on the corner lot issue. It's something we're trying to address, and we're still working on it. So I do appreciate you taking the time, Jordan, to come down today. But we are putting the time and effort in. Government can be a good thing if it works in the process in which it is now, and that's what we're doing. So, and we hear you. I mean, it might not bet 1,000 when we do it, but your voices are heard and the efforts are being made. So, again, appreciate you guys coming down today. Thanks.
Thank you. Next item.
Item 50, an ordinance to vacate land as described on the agenda. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 50 is today. Proponents, please. See none. Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 51, an ordinance to approve the Elmwood Townhomes Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement.
Public hearing on number 51 is today. Proponents, please. Mr. Seaton.
Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. I'm available for any questions, and so are the project reps.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none. Any opponents?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. Again, I'm sort of against TIF in general, but this is also an area where I'm kind of familiar with. I haven't got into all these documents on this one, but I was sitting in the dental chair one day right across 3 small houses that apparently are going to be taken by this development. Maybe from 54th Street all the way down to Elmwood Towers. Elmwood Towers needs to probably be redone anyway. Right across the street to the opposite direction, north, there's Gerda's Bakery. There's an old-time gas station that you probably want to get rid of. And it's a straight shot to the UNMC campus down on Saddle Creek and tying in with some of that other development. The other direction is 52nd Street to tie in with a bus route. So I'm wondering, well now, those houses I was looking at when I was in the dental chair didn't look dilapidated, didn't look abandoned. But obviously they're probably going to get taken. To the left of that, going east, there's some buildings that were vacant for a while. Quite a while actually, but it looks like people have tried to refurbish them, trying to start new businesses in them again, including the one on the corner right across from Elmwood Towers, which is a nice looking restaurant now. I wonder if those people are aware that they are in the path of development towards Saddle Creek. There isn't anything said here about the neighborhood association. I don't know, that might be part of Dundee possibly. But you know, with all those buildings on the north side going east of 52nd Street, why do we need to take 3 small affordable houses out of that block there between Elmwood Towers and 54th? It just kind of smells to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents on 51? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Begley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I just wanted to comment that the neighborhood association, I did speak to them when this first came up through planning, and I was able to get coordination between Mr. Noddle and Jen Bauer, the neighborhood association from Elmwood Exorbitant Neighborhood Association. The conversations were made. After that meeting, there was some things that were changed that were happy. It made the neighborhood association happy. So as I said in prior meetings, I appreciate Mr. Noddle taking the time to explain what the process was with this development. I know that Elmwood's, the pharmacy is moving to one of those locations there up on Leavenworth Street, and there's some other development going on with it beyond this. So I think the people in general are excited about this. And again, I appreciate Jay, you taking the time to have those meetings when you did, because that helps the process of letting the neighborhood folks know through their network of what's going on. And I appreciated that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Harding.
Just wanted to make a quick comment on density, and that's one of the things that we've been stressing a lot of what we need to do in the city is have more dense development, because land is going to run out at some point for us, and in order to continue to build a healthy city, we need to become more dense. So the point was just made a few minutes ago about taking 3 or 4 residences down, but you have to remember too, in place of those 3 or 4 residences will be 19 living units. So I think the goal of being a more dense community and increasing the housing stock is certainly being met in this regard. As it relates to the neighboring development, it's the same developer in essence doing that work as well too. So I know that those tenants are well aware of what's going on.
Thank you. No further lights. Next item.
Item 52, an ordinance to approve the MH Landing Lot 5 Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement.
Public hearing on number 52 is today. Proponents, please.
Yeah, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department, and on this agreement, I'm also available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 53, an ordinance to approve the Shirley Tyree Theater Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement.
Public hearing on number 53 is today. We have the proponent, Mr. Seaton, and we also have the proponent by Zoom, who will do next.
All right, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. If you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you. And now we have Michael Sands.
Michael Sands, 1700 Farnham Street, on behalf of the applicant. Also happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Oh, come on down. Proponent? Okay. Yes. And you're speaking in favor, right?
Pardon?
Are you in favor of it?
Yes, I'm a proponent.
Okay. Great. Just name and address for us.
Okay, my name is Harry Urey of the Afro Academy of Dramatic Arts, 1626 Lothrop Street, Omaha, Nebraska. As a proponent for the Kathy Tyree Black Box Theater, I wish to just say a few things. And of course, I made a presentation last time, but I'll be brief, hopefully as brief as the others have been. My mom and dad, they began their life journey here in Omaha. My father had commuted here from Omaha from New York during the war, and he met my mother at the Dreamland Ballroom here in North Omaha. Now that's a personal family story, but it means a lot because North Omaha was an area that was steeped in culture and art and music and so forth. And it continued for quite some time. I will say our family, we got very much involved in the arts and the theater during the 60s, particularly after the problems that occurred with some of the civil unrest that occurred in the city. Beverly Blackburn, she was an activist in the community, and she maintained, along with my mother, others, to promote arts and culture. We had many different talent shows and cultural presentations throughout the city, particularly for young youth. It was very valuable, not only to myself and my brothers and my family, but many in the community. Subsequently, also at that time, the Omaha, they called it the Show Wagon, was very prominent. It was sponsored by the Omaha World Herald, of course, and the Omaha Parks and Recreation Department. One of the, well, I can't think of his name right now, I won't, but nonetheless, it did provide a good outlet. My brothers and I, we competed in that, and we were very often winners in that competitive competition. To move forward, from that, we decided in the summer of 1969 to establish and create the first black theater in Omaha. Quiet as it's kept, many people may not realize that we started one on the corner of 24th and Ames at 4424 North 24th Street. We produced many significant theatrical performances, had workshops in various areas, some of which included John Beasley, who had also, in many regards, started there, along with Kathy Tyree. She was involved with some of the arts program. We later moved to another location on the southwest corner of 30th and Izzard, 1001 North 30th Street. We continued. A church was removed there. It was under Our Savior's Lutheran Church. We continued with many outstanding arts and cultural events and activity, not only in the area of dramatic art, but music, fine art, African dance, creative writing, and photography. I'm only saying this because it's important. And this was a vision that we had many, many years ago. And we approached the city at certain times and other philanthropists for funding. It never came about. We did, however, receive some funding from the Nebraska Art Council at the onset, under the executive direction of Leonard Thiessen. He was the executive director of the Nebraska Art Council at that time. And subsequently, we received some funding from Expansion Arts. I'm only saying this because we need institutions in North Omaha that bear the name of people that have made a difference in the community. And certainly Kathy Tyree is one of those persons. I want also to say, with due respect to another just recent development that's occurring just catty corner from that, on the corner of 24th and Ames, the Noma Project, which was just been presented by the Omaha Planning City and the City Council. It's a good project, but here again, the city is backtracking. We have an iconic figure that made a significant impact in North Omaha. His name was Preston Love. And the city at that time indicated that they would venerate his activity and his proposals and so forth. And now we're taking it all away. One of the things that really begins gentrification in any area is to wipe away its significant history and cultural accomplishments of people. Omaha needs to bear the name, particularly that particular center needs to bear the name as the Kathy Tyree Center. Just as the Eugene Mall is named after our previous mayor, Robert Carey Bridge is named after a senator. We have, of course, the Buffett Foundation. There are many buildings and medical facilities named after him, and stores and so on and so forth. I'm only saying this, it's great. And I'll conclude now by just saying this, because I don't want Vinny to cut me short again, but I will say this, it's significant. We need this in the community. Not only, although it does, one other downside, of course, is that it's often considered that the center that promotes it, the union, it has to be very sensitive to the needs of the community. And black theater has often been considered a unique and very different type of medium or art form, a cultural art form. So that has to be respected. And I'll conclude now before you ask me to sit down. I just wanted to say that black theater oftentimes is unique. It cannot be constrained from delivering the more culturally mindful, positive, artistic presentations that elevate the creative, historic, and more beneficial contemporary cultural consciousness that is much needed by many of the young people in the community and adults as well. They need that. By all means, the truth, by our need to tell our black experience in America and the truth about the remaining mental and psychological vestiges of adverse slavery and historical and contemporary racism in America during the past as well as to the future. Black theater is and always has been a peculiar and unique theatrical genre and performance presentation art form. Unlike many of the European and often Caucasian theatrical and music performances, black theater is often caustic. It's provocative, sometimes bitter, angry, challenging, humorously satirical, but always mindful. Its performances often recreates sometimes harsh, stark, and unapologetic realities of Black families and communities that are often full of energy, tension, humor, emotion, challenge, fear, courage, spirit, growth, reason, and redemption. And Black theater is resplendently cathartic. It's not always light, rosy, and nice like a dancing bowl of cherries. Black theater is strong, culturally historical, and emphasizes and embraces the historical and contemporary cultural, spiritual enlightenment. It can be entertaining, but only by its own design or by either its own interpretational intent, total comprehensive purpose, illuminating theme, or by its visionary purpose or the accidental outcomes of its created byproducts. I'm glad as well, I know the community needs the Kathy Tyree Theater. It's very much needed in North Omaha. I sincerely encourage you as city council members to vote positively for the endorsement and the acceptance of this long-awaited and needed program in North Omaha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing a performance there. We'll move to opponents now.
Seeing no opponents. Let me move over here. Seeing no opponents. Public hearing is closed.
Item 54, an ordinance to approve an agreement with the Elkhorn Public Schools for one associate school resource officer and a marked police cruiser.
The public hearing on agenda item 54 begins at this time. Come on down. Proponents, please.
Yes, sir. Charles Ott, Omaha Police Department. I'm a lieutenant with the Neighborhood Services Unit. I'm here oversee the school resource officers, here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents? Last call, seeing none, public hearing is closed.
Item 55, an ordinance to transfer $5,961,163 in the wage adjustment account to city departments.
Public hearing on agenda item 55 begins at this time. Proponents? Seeing none. Opponents? None. Public hearing is closed.
Item 56, an ordinance to establish a Class B flammable liquids storage district number B-211 at 7500 Mercy Road for Bergen Mercy Hospital.
The public hearing on agenda item 56 begins at this time. Proponents? Seeing none. Opponents? Seeing none. Public hearing is closed.
Item 57, an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement for the redevelopment of various properties within the Saddle Creek District with the city's commitment to reimburse expenses for sewer relocation up to $3.5 million.
Start with proponents, please.
Council President, members of the council, Jessica Thomas, 10250, here on behalf of the developer. Today, as you can see up on the board, we've got a proposed phased development of the area surrounding Saddle Creek and Harrison. As you can see right here, this development is intended to be a 6-phase project. I've recently joined this project, and since I've been on board with this project, I've had the luxury of hearing a lot of history and a lot of stories behind a number of sites here. And as was mentioned earlier, the real intention of this project is to bring density. You know, as mentioned before, Omaha is reaching a peak in which the availability of land out west is becoming smaller and smaller, and this is a perfect opportunity for a site that is currently industrial, open, old former car lot to become something new, something vibrant. The developer has had a number of meetings with the associations. This project they've been working on this project for the last 2 years with the city and in close contact with the mayor's office, council members, and really trying to move this project forward. What you see encompassed in the agreement is an agreement on behalf of the city to contribute $3.5 million to the relocation of a sewer. So I'll walk you through that briefly here. And as you can see, Saddle Creek currently runs this direction heading northwest. The intention would be for that to be closed off and then to redirect all the traffic heading north on Northwest Radial and then Hamilton. As it stands today, there is a large sewer line that runs through that property. In order to develop the site, we need to move that sewer line. The intent would be to run that sewer line along Hamilton and down Northwest Radial. Also within the project is there's an intention to form a BID. The BID is intended to help redevelop this site and enhance the corridor that you can see running from Northwest Radial all the way up to the Peanut. The classics that everybody knows and loves in this area are intended to stay. You know, everyone knows the Homey, Sergeant Pfeffer, Saddle Creek. Those sites are intended to stay and will be around for the project. The developer, as mentioned before, has worked closely with the associations. And the first phase of the project is this one right here in the northwest corner of Northwest Radial and Hamilton. It's intended to be a 160-unit multifamily project. The developer is here to answer any questions, and I'm here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents?
Josh Hannum, 1410 North Saddle Creek Road. I'm the lead developer on this project, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Other proponents? Ms. Brink?
Megan Brink, 1709 North 50th Street. I'm with the Metcalf Harrison Neighborhood Association, and we are supportive of this project. Josh, or the developer, has engaged with the neighborhood for several years on this project, and we would love to see the old car lot turned into something a little bit more beautiful in the neighborhood and for it to be more walkable and usable for the neighborhood. And obviously, with the rising housing costs and the need to bring in additional units to Omaha, we are supportive with that as well. So,
thank you. Other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents?
Thank you for leaving that up. Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. Once again, we're awful close to my property. I don't have time to knock on everybody's door. I don't know, I didn't hear anything about a new neighborhood association. Apparently this is connected with the other one that's down the street on Saddle Creek. And it's gonna go northwest, right up towards Benson. Has are you taking out the roundabout? How about the people a little bit further northwest and up in the expensive housing? Are they gonna enjoy all the additional traffic, car traffic? How about people over more towards me on 50th between Hamilton and Cummings Street? Are we gonna like all the additional traffic on narrow streets? It doesn't take too much to enlarge that map to see it going from Maple all the way to Dodge Street, 72nd Street, all the way to Saddle Creek, and then south towards Leavenworth. It's all part of this big overall master plan, which is maybe okay. I'm just saying that maybe there's not enough transparency about all this. I know this area is not extremely pretty, but I do have a question as to why we're doing this instead of the refurbishing all of the apartments to the east or to the south there that need refurbishing. But we probably don't want to touch it because that's probably associated with the immigrant community and the people coming over with United Nations funds. We need a place for them. And if we leave them there long enough, then we'll have to tear that down too. Only 3 blocks from my house now. A little short hop, skip, and jump to the west. And I believe we're on that boundary of the opportunity zone or something they call I don't remember now, but sublighted, blighted, and then you come in and maybe find code violations, chase people out, so you place is vacant for a while. Yeah, there are some businesses in here that probably will benefit, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll get chased out too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. This is in my district, so I do want to address this just a little bit. And I've worked on this, or wanted to see this happen for about 10 years, I would say. So I'm pleased to have engaged in the process with Mr. Hannum and also the Neighborhood Association and Ms. Brink. And I want to thank council members for delaying this item a few weeks ago so that we could have a large meeting with the Neighborhood Association, which we did. And there was great turnout and positive engagement in what we're trying to accomplish here, because this is one of our great neighborhood business districts that's got all the character of a Dundee, of a Benson, of a Blackstone, the other great examples we have and that we've seen work throughout the city. It just needs some reinvestment in its public infrastructure to make it successful long-term and to improve and build upon its current character, but make it better for pedestrians and bicyclists and the businesses that are currently there. And as was noted, we have some great businesses here that are also in favor of this project. Sergeant Pepper's, The Homey, Janisex, a lot of great examples. A rather new addition, Saddle Creek Breakfast Club, which is hugely popular. And so the neighborhood's looking for these amenities where they can walk to them and have it be part of their neighborhood and have it be successful long-term. And so what we have before us today and that we would vote upon in 2 weeks is a conceptual document in this redevelopment agreement on these items that, as was noted, conceives of a new apartment project on Zone 1 there, Zone 1 and 2 on this map, that currently is a vacant used car lot and has been vacant for quite some time. And I can tell you, I get lots of calls from the neighborhood about issues we've had there. And so they're excited to see that change and have that be improved. And that is somewhat the linchpin, I think, to the rest of what we're trying to accomplish here, which is the city's commitment for $300,000 to begin the streetscape, Northwest Radial to the Peanut, and yes, the Peanut would stay, to do things like landscaping, increase the parking, make the sidewalks better, connect what is otherwise one of our most important bike paths to the east there, the Happy Hollow path, bike path that many use to get downtown across Hamilton Street and across a pedestrian bridge there that we're thankful for, but that could also use some reinvestment and some improvement too, to connect to the neighborhoods to the east, which do include not just my district, but districts 2 and 3 as well. So a lot of great potential here, I think, that everyone is excited about. The document also conceives of the creation of a business improvement district to take care of these improvements and help fund them once we would do them, just like we've done in Benson and Dundee, and I think would be important to attracting additional private and philanthropic investment, and I think that is an interest here, like it was in those other districts. So by the city moving forward with this plan and creating some initial investment itself, I think we're going to see some great results for the neighborhood long term. There are some recent issues we still need to resolve regarding the floodplain. As some of you may have read in the World Herald today, there are some new flood maps being discussed by the NRD and FEMA that impact our entire community, and that I would encourage our planning committee to address with Mr. Fanslaw in coming months to see how that does or could impact future development in our city, including how some streets may be considered waterways, even though they're already paved and are not a waterway, and might impact development going forward. So that might be a challenge we need to overcome in this area, it being Saddle Creek, but I'm sure and I'm confident we can. And there's many more processes and steps to this vision, which is the apartment project itself that would have to come back to the city council on with its own details. And then, of course, the BID process itself, and certainly the streetscape process, all those things would have to come back to the city council to make this happen in the next 6 to 12 months. But I can tell you all those things are underway. So I'm very excited about it and positive about it, and positive that this is going to be a welcoming community for everyone, including those that currently live there, and currently including those ones that live in the apartments just to the south that were referenced. So this is for everyone, and it's well overdue and could, I think, lead to long-term success in this area. The last comment I'd make is, I guess, for you, Mr. Curtis, or maybe Mr. Fanslaw. I look forward to continuing our work together on this. As you may recall, I adopted most of this project into the city's budget last year, and it was approved, but it was vetoed. But I'm pleased to see it come back with this type of structure around it, and we're all moving together on the same page, so I look forward to doing that with you. And because we're at this stage in June, prior to the next CIP being finalized, I would hope that what's conceived of in here, if it's approved, will then appear in this year's CIP as the document conceives. Would that be your understanding too?
Dave Fanslow, City Planning. The CIP is still a work in progress, so I can't really say what projects are in or out yet, but everything's still being considered.
And that's my point. We have good timing here because if we agree to this agreement says it will be in there. So,
well, I guess I can't talk about the funding source because I don't know what funding source. Last year we talked about a funding source that wasn't quite ready for this area yet.
And I disagree with that statement, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm giving you a softball here to say we can work this out together in that document because this is what the agreement says. If we approve this agreement, the city is obligated to do that. Okay. So, thank you.
Sure.
Having said that, I don't have any further remarks today, but obviously we'll be supporting this in a couple weeks as we work on the rest of these elements and would recognize Councilman Bailey.
Thanks, Mr. President. Josh and Jessica, it's good to see you here today. I want to commend Council President Fesserson. I know you've been working on this, you said, for a long time. And you guys are local, and I've had the chance to meet with you on things going on in my district. And when I saw that you guys were involved in this one, it was mentioned earlier, Mr. Storr was sitting in the dental chair. Well, One-Eye Jack sits there right just west of Saddle Creek. My dad used to take my three brothers and I to get goody popped by the case. So I spent a lot of time in the dental chair because of going in where you're going to make this great development. So in Kelly's Bowling Alley and all the other places that Pete mentioned, it'll be a great project, and I'm glad you guys are on it because I know if I got questions besides talking to Council President Fesserson, I have your numbers and you're very available. And I know Pete said that you guys have done the outreach and had meetings with the community and the neighborhood folks. So if I got questions, you'll hear from me, but I wish you the best of luck because that really is a beautiful area and you're just going to amplify that even more. I wish you nothing but success. Thanks.
Thank you. No further lights. Next item.
Item 58, an ordinance to approve a redevelopment agreement with the Omaha Streetcar Authority for a streetcar.
Public hearing on number 58 is today. Proponents, please. Mr. Anderson.
Mr. President, members of council, Troy Anderson, Mayor's Office. So I'm here to present to you the redevelopment agreement. I'm going to try to just provide a brief summary just to maybe tee up the public hearing today. So as a follow-up to City Council's approval of the Urban Core Housing and Mobility Redevelopment Plan back in March of this year, and in order to implement the parking and mobility strategy that was identified in that redevelopment plan, we're here today to present this redevelopment agreement between the City of Omaha and the Omaha Streetcar Authority. The redevelopment agreement broadly sets forth the obligations of the city and then the obligations of the Omaha Streetcar Authority. Under the obligations of the city is obligated to continue to take the necessary steps to prepare and issue bonds to fund construction of the streetcar system. Remember, in the event the city does issue and sell bonds in an amount sufficient to fund the streetcar system, that the bond documents will dictate how the funding is received and distributed for construction. The city is not responsible for or obligated to fund any expenses until the city issues a notice to proceed. That's really what then kicks in the obligation to begin to start funding and constructing the streetcar. Under the obligation of the city is also responsible for granting and using tax increment financing as set forth in the policies. There's an Exhibit F and an Exhibit G in the agreement. Exhibit F
broadly are the TIF policies and procedures, specifically laying out the percentage contributions that are required. And then Exhibit G are the density and valuation benchmarks that the city will continue to use in recommending and approving tax increment financing projects. So now the obligations of the Omaha Streetcar Authority. Upon receipt of a notice to proceed, the Omaha Streetcar Authority will then be responsible for construction, operation, and maintenance of the streetcar system. But OSA will not be responsible for construction operation unless and until a notice to proceed is received from the city. OSA would then have to continue to provide quarterly reports, including detailed financial accounting, and then upon completion of the construction would then have to be responsible to transfer and convey ownership of the system to the city. So remember, this is just the next step in the process, right? We went through the redevelopment plan. This is now the redevelopment agreement. Again, until there's a notice to proceed and until bonds are actually sold, we can issue bonds, but until bonds are actually sold and the funds are received, does this really commit either party? Do those steps really commit either party to building the streetcar? This just continues to build upon the momentum and the progress that we've made thus far. And so with that being said, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. We do have representatives, the law department, finance department, to answer any other questions you may have.
Thank you. Other proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council, city staff. I'm Jay Noddle, 2285 South 67th Street, here today in my capacity as president of the newly formed Streetcar Authority. I want to echo everything Mr. Anderson just had to say and just offer a couple of additional thoughts. First is that there's been a lot of time spent on this. Public, private, paid professionals, and volunteers. Lots and lots of eyeballs, lots of study, lots of conversation, quite a lot of engagement. We're trying very hard to make sure that anyone that contacts us gets a phone call back as quickly as possible and is given some time to state their reasons for calling, pro and con, and I think we're doing really well with that practice. Having said that, I think it's important to realize that this whole initiative is based on economic development and jobs for the core of our region that will strengthen the entire region. And while the focus is oftentimes simply on a streetcar and the number of people that can be moved by the streetcar, it's really essential infrastructure, not unlike what would happen in a greenfield when a major suburban development is planned. There's a lot of infrastructure, on-site, off-site, public and private, that's required in order for those developments to be successful. You hear about them and act on them every week. In this case, we have so many of the right parts and pieces here in Omaha. What we're missing is a piece of infrastructure like this. And fortunately, we're able to take a hard look at comparable projects that have been done in cities all across America. Some that have been done 3 decades ago, others that are just opening now. And the results are really very, very compelling. We wouldn't be here today had they not been so compelling. But we have a very good handle on what does happen when infrastructure projects like this are undertaken. We've spent a lot of time talking to developers, mostly the local developers, folks that have worked quite a lot here in Omaha. We've also talked to some national developers who haven't worked in Omaha yet. We're exploring the technology that is really the best match for this, whether it's overhead lines or battery operated equipment. We don't really know that yet. We want to be smart about what we're doing. We want to be diligent about what we're doing, and we want to make good decisions for our community. So thank you for your time. I'm certainly here to answer any questions, and we look forward to working with you in the weeks, months, and years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents, please.
Mr. President and members of the City Council, my name is Jason Lanahaw. My address is 17070 Wright Plaza. I'm here on both behalf of my company, Lanahaw Real Estate Company, and also Project Beacon that was before you all here last month. So I thank you for your time today. Mr. Anderson and Mr. Noddle, who are spearheading this efforts, will, I'm sure, can answer many details, but what I wanted to show you all today is a case to show you why this makes sense and what this can produce, and not in aspirational tones, but in reality. So Mr. Noddle mentioned that the streetcar is not only essential infrastructure, but I also think it is rocket fuel for our city, for the development within our community. Over these years, we've all discussed and strived to answer the questions of how do we grow, how do we add density in our city, how do we ensure the health of the urban core, how do we attract companies and so forth, retain and attract talent. And I believe, as Mr. Anderson had said before in a previous meeting, how do we keep from becoming Anytown USA? So these are obviously complicated questions, and the answers are multifaceted, but I believe the foundation to answering many of these are before us today, along with what we brought before you last month. So let's just take this down to a more practical level. The base premise is that a streetcar would serve as that rocket fuel for development. As I sit here and speak to you today, I'm pleased to present to you two major projects that will be spurred with the approval and the sale of the bonds of the streetcar, and these will be spurred in short order. So the first, which you have all seen before, is, let's see here, is a new downtown headquarters for Mutual of Omaha, a $600 million investment into our urban core. Beyond the dollars, it's also a symbol. It's a symbol in the region that Omaha is open for business. We're growing, we're ready to compete for the best and the brightest in the region. The reason the streetcar is important to us is that this project is just simply not feasible without this mode of transportation. In simple terms, we have 4,000 associates working in this building, and we have 2,200 parking stalls. In more aspirational terms, Mutual of Omaha is willing to commit this money to build an expensive building, to be a leader in the community because of the theory that it will attract and retain future talent. With that comes the streetcar and the need to attract that talent. So that's the first item. The second that will be spurred immediately with the streetcar is the redevelopment of their current campus. So in here is hundreds of millions of dollars of additional development. Once again, all unlocked by the streetcar. So without the streetcar, neither of these projects occur. And it's not because of any sort of threat, but it's simply they're not feasible. So just to wrap up quickly, today, with the streetcar, and with the approval of the streetcar, we anticipate to break ground on this in January of this coming year. So with that, I thank you for your time. Obviously, the experts are here and they can answer many questions, but I'm also happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Davey, Executive Director of Omaha by Design, 618 South 11th Street. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for laying out a summary of a very complex but important agreement before you all. This is exciting to be here speaking on behalf of Omaha by Design, of course. As many of you know, for more than 2 decades, Omaha by Design has been the Omaha Metro's nonprofit hub for people-centered urban design and policy. And throughout that time, we have both led and supported quite a number of efforts in the planning, zoning, transportation, design, and development spheres. And I think collectively, these have definitely shaped our city for the better. Today, I'm here to enthusiastically lend our support for the streetcar redevelopment agreement that is before you. We do so because we recognize that a modern streetcar is a vehicle for much more than just transportation. It really moves us towards a more vibrant, livable, and equitably prosperous city for all. It does so by maximizing the people-centered vibrancy that underpins a healthy and vibrant urban core. And a healthy urban core is crucial to the economic thriving and the quality of life to be found throughout the region. This means that everybody benefits regardless of where in the city they live or work. And, importantly, this plan contains a way to pay for it with just a share of the value that it creates for our society. Most simply, this is because a modern streetcar will transform underutilized land and surface parking into places for people, including thousands of units of much-needed housing and jobs. As part of a total mobility system, including enhanced transportation and transit options, a shared parking network, and safe and convenient bicycle and pedestrian facilities, the streetcar will boost businesses and spur new job creation in where it's really most efficient and accessible for everybody, right there in the urban core. Working alongside the agreement, which was mentioned, that's been before you, passed in March, the city's, the Urban Core Housing and Mobility Redevelopment Plan. The impact is really going to be significant. The numbers are big. 30,000 new residents and 30,000 new jobs in the next 30 years. $5 billion in new development, $3 billion in just the next 15 years. And these projections are not just merely hopes. They are really grounded in the real learned experiences of our peer cities like Kansas City, Milwaukee, Salt Lake, Oklahoma City, and really dozens of other cities that have chosen to use these modern streetcars as a catalyst for significant economic development, for enhanced job opportunities, for cultural and entertainment options, and to boost the tax revenue to the benefit of the broader community. Really kind of, as Mr. Lanahaw said, rocket fuel for development. These can do amazing things. And consider this, of course, as we just saw, we already have a massive head start on where the other cities were in our place. With Mutual of Omaha's investment, both downtown and in the redevelopment of their current campus, that'll anchor at least a fifth and perhaps as much as a third of that 15-year, $3 billion impact that we project. So in summary, we support Omaha's streetcar because it is both a bold move, it is, and a wise, measured investment. It's also that. In the future of our city. Your vote in support of the redevelopment agreement is a vote of confidence in the more vibrant, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable city that we are on the path to becoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Yep. Neutral? Oh, you're a proponent or an opponent? Okay. Which one do you want to be?
I guess I'll be a proponent.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I already called that, so I'm closing the public hearing, but I'm going to recognize you, Ms. Harris, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm Julie Harris with Bike Walk Nebraska, 108 North 49th Street. Although I was thinking this would be neutral, I just want to state to start with that we are proponents of the streetcar. In our mind, it's a safety issue. Every person that's on the streetcar coming downtown or to the Blackstone district or wherever is not somebody driving in a car, trolling for a parking space, and not looking out for somebody biking and walking in our downtown or urban core area. So for us, it's a safety issue, and we are proponents of it in general that way. I'm just here to just raise a bit of a red flag because things are moving so quickly and decisions are getting made in people way over my pay grade are making those decisions. So I just want to make sure there's a couple things on the record for consideration, especially now that we know that we could be breaking ground in January, that things are moving quickly. The Market to Manhattan Bikeway, as you know, right now is on Harney Street. It's a pilot project. It is something that we are evaluating, and we have a 6-month evaluation report that showed so far biking is up 140% on Harney since we built that protected lane. As far as I know, we don't know for sure if the streetcar will run on Harney or not, but if it does, The pilot project was designed to kind of show proof of concept about whether or not that facility would work on Harney. Both can fit on that corridor as I understand it, but I just want to make sure that as decisions get made and agreements get determined, that we don't lose sight of the anything that could preclude the Market to Midtown Bikeway from becoming a permanent piece of infrastructure in addition to the streetcar. I wanted to show you just a couple of pieces of data that we have so far in our evaluation. And we have this for 4 different intersections that Harney crosses. At Park Avenue, you can see here we have 3 lines that show the amount of bike traffic from from Farnham Street, St. Mary's Avenue, and Leavenworth. As you can see, it starts from May of 2021, goes through November. It comes down as the temperature comes down. That's what we would expect. And this is when we add Harney to that analysis. And you can see very clearly where we brought the Market to Midtown Bikeway online on Harney. People are choosing to shift their trips on bike over to Harney because it's a safer facility, and we know that's what gets more people biking. Here we are at 24th Street, same phenomenon. 20th and 17th. So we've seen it across the board from the full length of the bikeway. It's showing so far, although we haven't hit the final end point for our evaluation, all signs point to this being a huge success. So it will never be easier or cheaper to build the permanent bikeway than it would be to do it in conjunction with the streetcar. Trying to retrofit it back in after the streetcar is built will be way more costly, more of a headache, and political will. We all know it just wouldn't get approved, frankly. So the time to do it is now. We need to make sure that the agreements that are decided upon will include that part of the design. If there's funding that needs to be considered, we hope that's included. If we're going to spend this much for a streetcar, we should spend the remaining this much for the bike lane. It just makes sense to do it all at the same time. So that's just my minor red flag. My spidey senses went up when I heard that this was going to be on the agenda this week, and I just felt like we needed to make sure that was on the record. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and certainly can make the future evaluation results available to you as well.
Thank you. So, Ms. Taylor, I might call you up on that item and a couple other things that I wanted to discuss, and then maybe we'll have some further engagement with Julie here in a minute. I think you're probably the right person to ask some of these questions. Go ahead and identify yourself, if you would.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department.
Thank you. So, as was noted, this is a complicated document and a series of complicated documents, and there's lots of attachments to this document that outline what we're trying to do here in terms of the next step and as it applies to a streetcar. But primarily what this document does is it outlines the procedures and guidelines by which we would allocate or allow up to $356,400,000 in tax increment financing for those projects, right?
Correct. I think I would say that what this does is it sets forth the framework with which we can support a bond issuance of that size.
Yes. And it's done primarily with, I think it's 4 tranches of tax increment financing for, what might be considered just current properties in the district, existing redevelopment projects, and then 2 kinds of new redevelopment projects, depending upon where it's located. I think it's in the first 3 blocks or the 4th to 6th block.
Correct.
Right? So I know you've engaged some developers in that conversation because it's important to know how development would feel about that and how that might work. Do you want to talk about that meeting you had a little bit?
Of course. What I would share with the council is what we shared distinctively with the developers, which is historically and across every other community that's installed a streetcar, there has been a significant bump in the assessed value of properties immediately adjacent to the line. That's because that property becomes more valuable. You also have the ability to create more dense developments. So obviously you can place more value on a single property than you could otherwise. In general, that increase in assessed value is what the city looks to capture in order to repay the cost of installing the streetcar infrastructure. So what we explained to the development community is that the city is simply looking to allocate the additional tax revenues that come or that are yielded from that increased assessed value and use those funds to repay the amount of money that we will garner from bond sales to support the streetcar. So essentially, a property would have an assessed valuation that would increase by 20 or 25%. So that's going to yield an additional tax revenue that would not otherwise exist but for the streetcar. We're going to take that yield, that additional allocation of funds, and use that to repay the bonds that will support the construction of the streetcar. So in essence, what a developer will have is its ability or their ability to place their project or do their project just like they would otherwise. They'll still be able to capture a sufficient amount of tax revenues to cover the margins that they need. So we always underwrite projects, but that the additional yield that comes from the valuation that is directly related to the streetcar is what's going to be allocated to the bonds.
Mm-hmm. And so we've never done this before in the city, so I think it's important just to kind of walk through this a little bit as to how we think it could work and to make sure folks understand how we think it could work. And that's the view of a developer. And so if you're a developer with a current project, this would not impact your current project, but it would extend your TIF note, right? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. If you currently have a project within the district that is subject to a tax or a redevelopment plan and a redevelopment agreement with the city, so you're currently having your taxes divided in order to repay the debt service on a note that has been approved by the city. In other words, you're currently subject to a TIF. This project or what we're doing here today won't have any impact on your current arrangement, your current agreement, and the current plan. What the city would then do is ideally, the increase in assessed valuation that would be attributed to your project will cause your project in likelihood to pay off a little faster than it would otherwise. So because that would pay off faster, the city would then capture what is on what we call the back end. So if your project now pays off in 10 years instead of 15, that additional 5 years would be allocated towards the streetcar, because the streetcar bump, the assessed value that comes from the streetcar infrastructure is what's causing that project to pay off early.
And you don't otherwise know the difference.
Yes.
If you're developing a new project, and I think that was largely the conversation you had with this group I was talking about, it will impact your project. And in fact, critical to the whole thing working is that the city be disciplined about requiring a 25-year TIF and associated density. So talk about that a little bit and what the reaction to that was in terms of, do they still feel like that's doable?
So that's what I was talking about a little bit earlier, which is essentially you will still be able to generate and service the note that you would be able to pay on that project to begin with, in the original project, without the streetcar. It's the additional yield that we're allocating towards the streetcar bonds. So for a new project, we're really trying to ensure that the developer stays in basically the same place they would be today, and that we are only capturing, or that we are intentionally capturing, the additional yield that comes from that new assessed value that is created strictly by the streetcar. So for new projects, they can. There's a couple of different things a couple of different ways they can go about that. In general, you'll have that increase in assessed value, but you also have the ability to create a more dense and larger project. So instead of having a 4 to 5 story building, you could have an 8 to 9 story building on the same parcel of land. So now you're actually allocating your acquisition costs for land across a project that is twice as big as it would have been otherwise, but your parking costs are actually still the same. So there's a couple of different ways that developers can actually maximize their ability to create these projects and still have that allocated yield, additional yield to the streetcar bonds.
Now take the perspective of a taxpayer. What's this mean to you?
Well, as a taxpayer, it generally means that the project is being paid for with tax increment financing revenues that are generated by the new development that only comes because of the streetcar. So essentially, the new development that the streetcar allows to occur along the corridor is what is being used to pay for the infrastructure itself. So I would say almost a little bit like some sort of improvement district, that those that are on the line are the ones that are going to be responsible for contributing towards the payment of the infrastructure costs.
And otherwise, no direct city budget allocations or anything like that to this project?
No.
What if you're another taxing jurisdiction like Omaha Public Schools? What's this mean to you?
Well, first and foremost, we're only capturing the tax and financing revenues we would otherwise be able to capture. However, I would also point out that along the line within the district, we're going to have increased sales tax revenues, other associated revenues. We are not capturing any revenues associated with single-family housing. So those revenues, as they increase in association with those parcels, will all go to the taxing jurisdictions. Projects that complete and come back onto the tax rolls in the next 4 to 5 years will all have that increased valuation all going to the taxing jurisdiction. So I think on balance, at the end of the day, all of those jurisdictions will benefit greatly, if not in the near term, definitely in the long term from this project.
Okay. And I guess I would note that there were no other jurisdictions here that were proponents, but there weren't any opponents here today either.
I know a number of the proponents, a number of the people that have worked on this project that were mentioned by Mr. Noddle have met with OPS and with the county, with various taxing jurisdictions. So we have tried to work with them as we've gone through this process.
And as was noted I think by Mr. Anderson in the initial presentation, this redevelopment agreement to be voted on the 28th is not a go or a no-go for the streetcar. It does the things we just discussed, but there's still an off-ramp should things not come together as anticipated, or should the council have more questions. Approving this redevelopment agreement does not obligate us to a streetcar. That occurs presumably when we would approve bonds later this fall, the private placement bonds.
That is correct. I would actually say that not only does this not obligate the city to issue or sell bonds, but it is a necessary step to get there, so that this does not obligate, approving this agreement does not obligate the city to issue bonds or build a streetcar. Not approving this agreement would be detrimental to that process.
And you feel you have a deadline, though, in respect to that, right?
Correct.
Talk about that.
We do have a deadline of issuing notices to divide of August 1st with the county. So in order to work with the county, we need to have this agreement in place. Also, we need to have these rules in place as we prepare the bond issuance so that we can give the assurances to the bondholders that our fiscal analysis is supported by binding obligations on the city.
And that's to capture presumably the value that just occurred by the function of having this conversation.
Correct.
And this may be a question for you, or maybe it might be for Mr. Curtis. We talked about this in our Finance Committee meeting today. A really important part of this for me, and I think probably for others, is the study we allocated or approved with MuniCap to come back and check on the presumptive development we built into this model, the tax increment financing models we just discussed, and also the likelihood that would be well received by private bond hold purchasers, right?
Correct.
And we have maybe some initial results back, or at least a conversation back that I don't know if Mr. Curtis is prepared to discuss. I'll give you that opportunity if you are.
Steve Curtis, City Finance. Everything I know, Jennifer Taylor also knows. We did actually have a conversation with them last night and this morning as well. And their initial, without giving us any documentation, their initial response was, yeah, we're kind of seeing what you see. They're still doing an extremely deep dive, but their indication was, yeah, we see what you're seeing. We understand how this works. They're going to have a very detailed model that goes along with it. And we've suggested to them a number of times we need it sooner as opposed to later.
Yes, and that's my kind of point in raising this issue, is that for me, although this redevelopment agreement doesn't, there's still off-ramps and may not be the go or no-go on the streetcar decision. I want to have that analysis before we approve this on June 28th. Is that reasonable?
I understand that that's the desire, and it's my understanding from talking to MuniCap that they should have at least an initial model that would be available for the council to review before the 28th. It may not be a final and perfected model, and it may not be what is 100% verbatim incorporated into the bond issuance documents, but it would be a verified model that would support the fiscal analysis that HDR has done and that we believe works to support construction of the streetcar.
Good. That would be important. I'm also anxious to get the parking division financial analysis as it applies to the annual operations. And I realize that's a bit out of this document, but it is conceived of in the various attachments and the partner that would be the transit authority. How far out do you think we're from that?
I don't want to speak for Mr. Smith, but I do believe he is working on that as well.
That would also be, I'd also prefer to have that information of some kind before the 28th. And then just a couple more questions, and I think there's some other lights on. The partner here, so the Streetcar Authority, the document says, could not proceed with any of these obligations unless the city provides a notice to proceed at some point. Who does that and how would that occur? And does that come to the city council at some point?
The notice to proceed would come from the city. I would envision that would go along with any sort of bond issuance and sale document, so that if we were to approve a set of bond documents, then upon sale of a sufficient amount of bonds, we would then be obligated to issue the notice to proceed.
So in the timeline that's been discussed, that occurs after the bond issue?
That would occur after the bond issuance, or actually after the bond, I would say, in a nod to Mr. Curtis, we can issue bonds, but what we actually need to do is sell them. So it would occur after the sale of a sufficient amount of bonds.
And that comes, is that administrative or does that come to the council or?
I would include that as part of the bond issuance documents. So that if we were to say, and in theory, what I would imagine or I would foresee is that as part of the approval of the bond issuance, if we were to sell a sufficient amount, that would require us to issue the notice to proceed.
Okay. So it'd be administrative at that point?
It would be, but it would be part of the bond documents.
Then conversely, there's also discussion in this document about the ability to terminate if we found that the requisite funding was unavailable.
Correct.
How does that occur?
Well, by provision of this document, if we do not issue a notice to proceed and the funding is not available, the provisions of this document we automatically terminate. We would then have to go through the process of probably dissolving the Streetcar Authority under the terms of the interlocal agreement.
And who would initiate that?
I would have to look at the interlocal agreement, but the interlocal agreement spells out specifically how it's terminated.
Okay. And then let's talk about the TIF fund a little bit, which will get me to Ms. Harris's question. So the $356 million, of course, would be designed to construct the streetcar, and that's would be the top, obviously, priority in this mix should this proceed. But it's also been part of the initial announcement that we were talking about affordable housing too, that could be funded out of that TIF separated fund, and maybe some other infrastructure like two-way streets, and I would think some other infrastructure like bike lanes would be in that mix as well. Has that been a conversation with Bike Walk Nebraska or anybody else at this point?
I personally have not spoken with Bike Walk Nebraska, but I have the email correspondence you sent me, and I think I would point out first and foremost, although it may seem to some that this is moving quickly, and I know Mr. Lanahaw indicated breaking ground in January, as far as the design and construction of a streetcar and the streetcar infrastructure, even if we take the step today, even if we issue bonds, even if we sell sufficient bonds and commence design and construction, there still is a significant amount of time that's going to be associated with that design and engineering process. We still have to figure out what's under the streets, where these rails can go, what the proper route is, and all of that is going to take at least another 6, 9, 12 months to do. So through that process, as Bike Walk Nebraska analyzes their data, that can be folded into the engineering and design process of exactly where those rails will go, what lanes will be dedicated, what streets it'll be on, what the route looks like. All of that is still quite a ways out in the design process.
And so I don't think anywhere in this document I saw mention of affordable housing or two-way streets or bike lanes. Should it be, or are you saying that can happen later?
Well, this is an agreement with the Streetcar Authority. So the Streetcar Authority is tasked with the singular obligation of constructing the streetcar. And the bond issuance that we will do to support the construction of the streetcar will have certain funds that will be dedicated to the repayment of the debt service for those bonds. However, should we get to a point hopefully sooner rather than later, that the tax increment financing revenues that we are generating within the district possibly are in excess of what's necessary to service the debt on an annual basis, then we would have funds available to dedicate towards affordable housing and other infrastructure projects within the district that are contemplated in the plan. But we do have to service the debt on the bonds first.
Okay, I understand that, but I also don't disagree with Ms. Harris's statement that if these things aren't thought of up front or included up front in the thought or the process, they probably aren't going to happen.
That is completely correct. And again, these statements have already been made here. And some of that infrastructure is part of a pilot program that is in place today. So obviously, as we move forward in the engineering design process, we will have to consider that infrastructure as part of what is dealt with when we look for what the route looks like, where it is, and those efforts.
Okay. The last thing I have is, as I mentioned, there's lots of attachments here, including the interlocal agreement, which previously did come to the City Council. But there was a lot of delegation of authority here to the Streetcar Authority from the city. And I think that's a little bit how partnerships would proceed on something this complicated and complex. But I just wanted to remind everybody that in the conversation of that delegation, that what's already been conceived of are open meeting laws and open meetings and competitive bidding through the city process.
Correct. The Streetcar Authority is obligated, even though that isn't spelled out specifically in this agreement, adding the interlocal agreement as an exhibit and incorporating it into this agreement just reminds everyone, as you said, the Streetcar Authority is obligated to adhere to Open Meetings Act. It is obligated to conduct itself through public bidding. So all of those processes that apply to both the city and to Metro will apply to the Streetcar Authority as well.
And annual budgets that come to the City Council, biannual reports, it talks about, how about purchasing? I believe it has a certain amount of purchasing ability on its own, wouldn't it?
It does. In the interlocal agreement that's already been approved, there are levels to which the authority must get approval of the supermajority of its board, even to commit funds to the Streetcar Authority. So all of those actions will likely be done, or all of those actions will be done in public meetings, in plain purview, and with transparency.
And none of those things can occur but for the notice to proceed from the city.
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate you asking those questions, and as I mentioned, I do want to see that Municap study as soon as possible. I hope the conversation with the bike lane and other housing and infrastructure projects can continue as we, walk through all the details here. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little out of order only because I want to make sure I cover this because it's fresh in my mind. Actually, one of the exhibits of this document is the Urban Core Housing and Mobility Redevelopment Plan, which does talk about bikes and scooter share programs. So it doesn't necessarily contemplate the exact route, but it does address the importance of it and therefore will be discussed as this goes on.
If I may, Councilman, that goes right to, this is as I've indicated to the council, and I've spoken to each one of you, this is another step in the process. I'm incorporating in this agreement all of our previous steps so that we have a holistic document moving forward.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I remembered that, so I put that up front. So I want to address a couple of additional issues. I think the talking about how this is financed and how this is being addressed is very important. The same questions I was going to ask as well. But in addition to that, I do want to address some of the non-economic issues that have been raised to this point. And that the first one I'll talk about is the pace at which we are going. I know there are some who've said we're going too fast on this, but I want to remind people that even though we are on a quick pace, we're being thoughtful and thorough about what we're considering, and that the information that as soon as you're getting it is shared with us, which I know you're doing. But it's also, it's our fiduciary responsibility as, going through these the explanations of how this is being financed. It's our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer and the citizens of Omaha that we are asking those. But at the same time, I think it's our responsibility that we need to be planning for the city's future. And I actually, my finger came out of where my comments were. I wanted to pick up on something that Scott Davey said, and I love the phrase. It was that this is a bold move, but a wise, measured, and I love the word in there, Scott, measured investment. So we need to make sure that we're positioning Omaha so that we can be successful in the future. And again, back to this pace, I think it's incumbent upon all of us elected officials who sit here today to make sure that we keep up with the pace. Because as you said, Ms. Taylor, if we don't pass this at this point, it would be detrimental to the project. But at the same time, as Council President Festerson brought up, and as we've all discussed before, we do have jumping off points, if you will. But we don't necessarily have those jumping off points if we stop it in its tracks today. So I think the steps we're taking, albeit maybe some view as fast, are not thorough. We are being thorough and thoughtful in the process. The other thing that's one of the other points that's been brought up is also the independent review of the scheme, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but the way in which this is being contemplated to be financed. We are, and that there was an article in the local paper not long ago about a gentleman who had raised some issues about just exactly that. And I found it interesting that it took about halfway into the article before it was talked about that, or it was acknowledged that the city is already in the process of doing that, and that's what MuniCap is. Mm-hmm. And I'll maybe, I know you talked a little bit about MuniCap, but maybe I'll give you a little opportunity here to talk about what MuniCap was hired to do. And I know we've talked about what the expectation is of a report, but I'll let you talk a little bit about MuniCap and their role in this.
Sure. So MuniCap was engaged to do an independent, what I would say is fiscal analysis of our financing plan. It was shared with us by our bond underwriters that if we wanted to sell tax increment financing revenue bonds or private placement bonds like we've contemplated, that we needed to have an independent third-party analysis essentially validate our assumptions, so that we couldn't go to the bond market and say, here you go, this is our plan, and this is how it's going to work. And by the way, trust us, that there's going to be somebody else out there who can look at our plan, look at our financial program or scheme, and say, this is actually based on valid assumptions, that we have looked at the background data, and that the background data and the plan supports the actual long-term 30-year income stream that would be necessary to repay those bonds. Those bondholders are going to want to have something that they can hold on to, read, and becomes part of the issuing documents upon which they can rely. That is what MuniCap has been engaged to provide for us, which is that third-party independent analysis. In talking with them over the last several weeks, we have provided them an extensive amount of information, which we've shared with the council as well. And that includes detailed parcel information on every single parcel within the district. So they have all of that information. They also have the information that we have shared with the council as to how we perceive or how we intend to administer tax increment financing through the guidelines that we've put in this document, as well as those minimum valuation and density programs that are included in your document as well. So MuniCap has actually taken all of that information, analyzed the district parcel by parcel with current valuations, projected valuations, what's reasonable, what's not, also phased in that development over the course of the next several years, and then scheduled out 30 years of bond revenues that would come from that development and what would be available then for us to pay back bonds. And that is the detailed schedule that they have shown us the last several days to make sure that we understand and agree with the assumptions and the metrics they've used to create those schedules, and that those schedules are in fact comport with what we have done. And I believe from what I have seen from them, it does a very good job of diving into the background data and producing the schedules that I think will support what we're doing.
So the brief 2 minutes that you just explained that, I think is further evidence of the depth, the thoughtfulness, the thoroughness that we are going through. And that's only one component of what we're talking about here.
Correct.
So I hope that helps assure those who are watching us to make sure that we are going through those steps. I wanted, and then, so you mentioned too that would be part of what part of the issuance of the bonds that would be let or would be marketed, and that obviously if there's a negative recommendation, I doubt we go out to issue any bonds, and that therefore we can still get off on before the point of no return at no expense to the city. But if we do, having that positive, okay, with some expense to the city, having that opinion associated with the issuance obviously gives investors a better comfort level when looking at that issuance as a potential investment.
I would say without that opinion, we would not sell any bonds.
Right.
So.
I would agree.
I would defer to Mr. Curtis, but I believe that's my understanding.
I don't think you don't even, Mr. Curtis. I think we know the answer. I want to go back just a couple more points on the housing and mobility redevelopment plan, which is part of this document, because I think it goes a lot to the goals of what we're trying to accomplish here, and some of those goals include what's called urban form, which is reclaiming land so that we can have other development to create, those seamless, active corridors, which this will connect certainly Project Next and UNMC and the Blackstone and Midtown to our downtown. And as Mr. Lanahaw pointed out, I think to me, one of the more interesting components of this project, albeit nothing to take away from Mutual's tower downtown or the streetcar itself, is that opportunity for redevelopment at Mutual's current campus. I mean, I think with the 11 or so projects that were mentioned in the housing and mobility redevelopment plan, that's, those, I've mentioned a few of those, but one that seems very, I think, attractive to me and actually makes a connection between the east and west points of the streetcar route or contemplated route. I think that's one of the most attractive and maybe not spoken enough of opportunities that will be created through this project.
I think one of the things, you're exactly right, and those maps that are included as part of this agreement, I think clearly show not only the existing development that is there that would support the streetcar, but also the opportunity for new development is there as well. And what I have had shared with me by a number of people as we've worked through this is not only do we have the connection between UNMC and the riverfront, we have something that is unique to Omaha in the fact that in between those two places, we're not just taking people from one place to the other, but that there are avenues all throughout that line as you go from UNMC to the riverfront, that you have opportunities for entertainment, for work, for residential options. So there is value in stopping between the two as well. But not only do you have those options, I think it's 10 of our 17 largest employers are somehow located within 3 or 4 blocks of the line, but you still have significant areas that are available for substantial development. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to be built upon the existing infrastructure.
And not that we might benefit, at least financially, directly. It also is contemplated that there will be a connection to our neighbors across the river in Council Bluffs too.
There's a lot of opportunity
here.
This
is, part of the housing and mobility plan.
Exactly.
The other 2 goals I wanted to touch on, I briefly did at the beginning, was the total mobility system, which this is. It not only contemplates the streetcar, but the other forms of mobility that we can, whether it's vehicular, non-vehicular, pedestrian, those are all part of the plan. A quick aside too is that some have asked about why this route first and not others. And I've always been a proponent of, and I think, most people would agree that, transportation systems should be able to move people from areas of unemployment to areas of employment. But you have to start somewhere. And I think, to me, this is the spine from which we can start developing, some of those either north-south routes or routes to the airport. But you have to, this has to be that base or that spine to be able to build off of, in my opinion. The last thing I'll talk about, and we've talked a little bit about this on other issues today too, is increasing density. And certainly, and you touched on it as well too, as you talked about the valuation, is that, we may not have, the amount of ground between points A and B is finite, but the ability to make those dense, each one of those different parcels more dense, is where some of those opportunities for increasing our valuation come in play and help in the financing of the system.
I would add, to quote generally Mr. Jensen, we can't park our way to greater growth.
I would agree with Mr. Jensen, who's blessed us with his presence in the back today. Thanks for being here, Steve. Again, I'll just conclude today by saying that, to reiterate that, yes, we are on a fast pace, but that's what we were elected to do too, is to sit here, analyze the information, be able to react to it so that we can continue to grow our city.
Thank you. Mr. Begley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I don't know if Councilmember Harding snuck into my office and was jumping on my notes here, but I might echo a few things that he mentioned that he eloquently put. And Councilmember Festerson also hit on a lot of themes that going through this process, we're doing our homework on it, and we're waiting on the analysis that hopefully is forthcoming that'll help us either confirm what we've been told already, or if those off-ramps that we speak of, if they have to be used. But looking at everything with this thus far, and I think it was a good point that Brinker made, that the backbone's got to be put in somewhere. The mobility system that we're talking about here to move people around, and the anchors of Mutual of Omaha moving to where they're going downtown, and the Med Center, which is growing, Project Next, if that comes online, which we're all hoping it does, I don't know what the figure is today, $3.5 billion, maybe 9,500 permanent jobs, maybe 40,000 to construct it. Everywhere in between those two lines, the developments that'll happen amongst that corridor of the city, it's an incredible future for Omaha if we get there. And again, having the conversation with my colleagues on this, a lot of questions have been asked. We've got answers on many. And again, from now to 2 weeks when our next meeting happens, I'm looking forward to getting the rest of that information to further analyze it. I know, Jen, if you want to take a break, I'll call Jay up and put him in the hot seat for a second. Stand close by, though.
Jay Noddle, 2285 South 67th Street.
Good afternoon, Jay. You and I had conversations. You're one of the many people I've talked to on the streetcar, and you're the point man here now. We had conversations today, one of them which was about the bike lane that is going down Harney Street right now. Do you want to talk to that a little bit about the conversation you had with Jen? Julie, I'm sorry, with Julie today.
Yes, but before I do that, I just want to say one thing about transparency. And I want you all to know, and I want the community to know, that transparency through this process is absolutely of paramount importance to us. You appointed 3 members of the city staff to the board several weeks ago, Mr. Stubbe, Mr. Curtis, and Mr. Fanslow. Metro has appointed 3 people from their staff, senior staff, to the board, and I am the chamber's representative on the board. We're all very, very committed to transparency. we're also very committed to adherence to the agreements. Not just the letter of the agreement, but the spirit of the agreements. That's woven through the fabric of all of this. We have one chance to do this, and we need to do it right. And in that spirit of transparency, I did have a meeting yesterday with Ms. Harris. And in that meeting, she expressed the same kinds of concerns and thoughts, almost verbatim, that she mentioned here today. And I was able to tell her that we haven't started the design. And one of the things that was said earlier about the responsibilities of the Omaha Streetcar Authority, one of the things that wasn't included is we're also responsible to oversee, to the extent we're qualified, the design. So it's not just the construction, it's the design that leads to the construction as well. So with respect to the bike lanes, we all know it's a pilot. The early returns are that it's successful within the boundaries of a pilot. Bikes are a very important form of transportation in any community or region's urban core. Certainly an important component throughout the entire region, but even more so in the core, as is a streetcar or similar type of public transportation system. The two need to work together. And to the extent that the pilot is successful in the eyes of those who are most qualified to make that determination, we're going to make sure that the streetcar doesn't bump the bikes. Now, whether they can all fit, and I was trying to be very clear about this yesterday, whether they all fit in the same right-of-way or not, we don't know yet. We don't know what's underground in those rights-of-way. And I think both Troy and Jennifer mentioned that. Our first thing we need to do is figure out if what we believe is down there under the roads and sidewalks is really there, and maybe of equal importance if it's where we think it is. Then we'll start to work through all of that. So if you assume that the pilot's successful to the extent that it wants to be permanent, maybe added to or planned for future additions, then we got to make sure that we understand that and that it is incorporated into the design. There should be ample dollars there to do that. I don't see that as an additional expense, incorporating that into the overall bike paths, into the overall design. Exactly where they go, we don't know. We don't even know which side of the street the streetcar is going to be on yet. So until some of those questions are answered, we can't fully address the bike issue, other than to say we believe they go together to the extent the pilot is successful and there's a green light to go forward, and we'll make sure that that happens.
Thanks, Jay. Another conversation we had, Mr. Curtis, if you could take a couple questions, please. Today, you and I were in a meeting with the mayor and others talking about the ARPA funds, and the reason I want to tie that in, we had talked about the money coming for affordable housing. Can you confirm, was it a $60 million figure?
It is, as contemplated, it's $20 million from our ARPA funds. It would be $20 million from philanthropy, and there's an additional $20 million that we are fairly certain that we can get through a HUD loan program.
Okay, and $20 million of that will be managed by Front Porch, is that correct?
We're anticipating all of it will be managed by Front Porch.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Curtis. The reason I brought that up, because of the project we got before us today, I want people out there listening to know that the affordable housing issue that's before us for not only Omaha, but the country and the world for that matter, that is something we're not taking our eye off of the ball in respect to that. I know Council President Fesserson, you had mentioned it earlier in your comments as well. So the great potential we have here with the streetcar, with the economic impact it'll have on creating jobs and being able to move people around in the urban core, affordable housing is something that I know many on the council, if not all of us, we won't lose sight of that. So I just want to make sure people understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights. Next item.
Item 59, an ordinance to approve a forbearance agreement in relation to the sublease and purchase agreement for the Omaha Hilton Hotel.
The public hearing on item number 59 is today. Proponents, please. Ms. Taylor, I think that's you again.
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. I'm just available to answer any questions if the council has any.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Ms. Taylor, I would just like to engage you for a minute. I don't want to prolong the meeting, but we have had a lot of very substantive issues today, as we have over the last several months. And we just had a pretty complex discussion about a complicated financing mechanism. And when you talk about complicated financing mechanisms, there weren't too many more that were more complicated than the Convention Center Arena and then the Convention Center Hotel, which is what this is on item number 59. So I just wanted to have a short conversation with you on the record about this too. So as it applies to the Hilton Hotel downtown, which is front and center this week, the city owns, but it's transitioning ownership to a private entity, right?
Correct. The City Council approved in 2018 a sublease and purchase agreement with an entity that essentially operates the hotel as a lessee, but the city still owns the physical property and acts as landlord.
And that's a long-term transition over how many years?
I think we still have 30 years.
Which is the life of the bonds, approximately, yeah. And so it's still the
I'm going to
intention.
play finance director today.
Yeah, you guys have had a mind meld recently. It's still the city's intention to transition that ownership. We don't desire to have it back, correct?
Correct.
I would think I would agree with that notion. And so at first was a little bit concerned when I saw the obligations of the private entity were falling behind in terms of what they're required to do under that agreement to make that happen. But as you explained at pre-council today, what we have before us essentially allows them more time to make the capital improvements that they're obligated to make in that agreement, and therefore keep our hotel, I think it's a 5-star hotel, well into the future, which has fallen behind recently, but I think the reason is mostly due to COVID and some financial pressures.
So instead of possibly exercising any rights or opportunities we would have in default under the existing agreements that would allow us to attempt to take back the hotel, what we've done here is put together a framework that allows the lessee to acquire the necessary funds to do the upgrades that are required under the agreement. It still requires the city to have significant oversight in making sure that those improvements are done in accordance with the plans, on time, on budget, all of that. So all of the expenses that are done associated with this, the city staff will have oversight over those as well. But it allows them to continue with the process that we set forth in 2018 under the sublease and purchase agreement.
Which is essentially a full-scale renovation by 2023 of the rooms.
Correct. They have already ordered all the case goods for the 588 guest rooms and are moving forward on the finalizing the plans and the ordering of the materials for all the suites.
In time for the next College World Series.
Yes.
All right. And so COVID notwithstanding, we feel they've been on track to meet those obligations, occupancy rates, maintenance, annual operations, all those things.
The current lessee works very hard and keeps a good eye on the management. Also, Hilton Hotel itself is significantly involved in the management of the hotel, and the city staff still, like I said, is regularly involved in getting financials and occupancy reports and other information related to the hotel. So, yes, they're continuing to work and uphold most of their obligations.
And I recall one of the big risks at the time was, there were so many different tranches of bonds involved in the financing of that, and the endless need to renovate and update its physical plant was daunting to a city. I think we were one of the first cities in the country to own a hotel, so it was very prospective in that.
And we were also one of the first cities to find a way to divest itself of its hotel.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Those were the nature of my questions. I wanted to make sure that was still on track and folks didn't lose sight of that.
No, all the plans are in place, and I think we are optimistic that by College World Series of next year, we will have a fully refreshed hotel.
Thank you. No further lights. Next item.
One public hearing can be held for items 60 through 62 for the 2022 annexation package. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Ordinances to annex OPPD Service Center located at 1101 North 180th Street, Pacific Renaissance located northwest of 192nd and Pacific Streets, and Methodist Women's Hospital located northeast of 192nd Street and West Dodge Road.
Public hearings on items 60, 61, and 62 are today. Proponents, please. Mr. Anderson.
Mr. President, members of council, thank you, Troy Anderson, Mayor's Office. So in the interest of time, although I can elaborate on any of this at any time, I'll try to be expeditious, try to hit just some key points. So here to present to you the 2022 annexation package. Every year we have some common goals: eliminate islands, must be revenue positive for the city, but does not compromise public safety. So we go through a very systematic, very analytical process. We started this year with 138 SIDs. Primarily, we look at SIDs just because of their very nature. That's why SIDs are somewhat created ultimately, right? To build the infrastructure and then subsequently become incorporated into adjoining cities. So oftentimes we look at SIDs, but this year, as we continued to look through those SIDs, we got down to the short list like we do every year. There were 7 SIDs in that short list. We go through a full service evaluation. This year, those 7 SIDs were actually 7 SIDs we've continued to look at year in year, try to keep a close eye on those. But this year, there were sort of 0 SIDs that met the threshold for a net positive package that we could have brought back before you. In the last couple of years, what we've also started to look at, though, were those adjacent areas that are not in SIDs. In fact, last year in particular, we came across a property that was not part of an SID. It was developed outside of that vehicle, and so what we came to realize was there were a number of these adjacent areas that were not SIDs that have positive revenue generation through ad valorem property taxes that we're providing essential city services to. So as we continue to expand our look at those adjacent areas, this year we identified 3 adjacent areas that we're proposing for annexation. The first one I'll highlight. Combined, these 3 adjacent areas total 196 acres of land. The first one is Methodist Women's Hospital. At the intersection of 192nd West Dodge Road, you can see here, bounded by the yellow dotted line. The second area that we're proposing for annexation is the Pacific Renaissance Edition. Also known as Ravello 192 Townhomes, and those adjacent lands located north and west of 192nd and Pacific Street. As you can see, particularly the multifamily residential apartment complex provides about 180 new residences that will be brought into the city as part of this. And the third area that we're recommending is simply the OPPD Elkhorn Service Center located at 180th and Old Lincoln Highway. So as we continue to look through areas that we propose for annexation, we continually look at the population, we look at debt service, we look at revenues, et cetera. The city will see an increase of approximately $18 million in new valuation as a result of this annexation. The package has a debt ratio of 0% and is revenue positive. The 10-year financial projections, I won't get into that. That information is in your packet, but again, I can answer questions on that. Public safety will not be compromised. These areas have low 911 call volumes. There is no parkland included in the annexation package, and so there's no impact to public works for trail maintenance, et cetera, or park maintenance. There are 0 public roads. There are 0 lane miles being added to the city's road network, which again takes into consideration maintenance costs for our public works department. And so all areas then, in conclusion, if not already served, will immediately receive all essential city services. including police, fire, solid waste removal, street maintenance, and snow removal. With that being said, I'll be answering any questions you might have.
Thank you. I was going to ask you which SID that was that we were just seeing with the ocean and the beach shot there. Somebody's screensaver.
Oh,
I'm just kidding. You don't have to-
sorry, it's not on there.
All right. Any other proponents today? Seeing none. Any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Troy, Mr. Anderson, thanks for your work on this again. As always, we have the same conversation every year. And I'll agree when we talk about annual growth and how important it is and essential for strong cities, so is public safety. In your comments, when you said it wouldn't compromise public safety, we're going to disagree on that. I know, it's just you and I. Like, nobody else is here.
Well,
Everybody's
I
gone.
talked to one of the police department. They were supposed to be somebody here to answer your questions as a follow-up to pre-council, but
I guess
it
it's
is
you
running
now.
late. So
It's you now.
You've been deputized.
Yeah.
So when we talk about compromising public safety, being the chair of the Public Safety Committee, if those who are not here now that we asked to be here decide to watch this, they'll hear what I'm saying. I ask in the committee, we ask, and we get updates from both chiefs, police and fire, about openings. And we know police has quite a few openings. We know that applications are down. We know that people are retiring. And what do I see from that? I see consistently reports of calls that are being held, that no police cars are available. This is public knowledge. This is what's happening. So if 3/4 of our budget is for public safety, and a large portion of that is for the police department, and every single one of us up here ran on public safety, right? If 3/4 of the money we have to use is for public safety, and we don't sit up here and ask, are we spreading our police officers too thin to have these reports, then we're not doing our job. And if we add one more person to what we already can't handle, then we're jeopardizing those in the Uniform Patrol Bureau on spreading them too thin, because they're running call to call or driving really fast, one of the two. When you say call volumes are down, you're probably right, but then we could get in the conversation of, well, then why did we build the Elkhorn precinct? If calls are down on the western part of the city, then why didn't we build it somewhere else? So with that being said, and we hear and we heard today the talk of density, and we know how important growth is, we know why we annex, right? And we will be out of land soon. And usually my no vote, like it will be in 2 weeks on this, usually comes from added lane miles, which we know we're short on public works employees, but we don't have any lane miles this time. Parks and trails, I don't believe we're picking up any parks this time. Trash, I hope we can handle. But again, there are residents that we're gonna gather from this, and those are possible police calls. And those are police officers that we've all sat here and said we were going to do whatever it took to make sure public safety is number one. So I would disagree. I think public safety is being compromised by any annexation package that's brought before us when we cannot take care of what we have now within the city of Omaha. So with that being said, I'm going to keep it as short as that too. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. No further lights. Next item.
Non-action items, items 63 through 99 do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, roll call.
Bagley.
Aye.
Harding. Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:13.